front of you.
Thing. There you go. Testing? Okay. You want to come down here in front, Julie? You guys want to come up?
I'm taking pictures.
Okay. So come stand here. Okay. I'm going to let you hold this.
Okay.
No. I need you to raise your right hand and repeat after me. State your name.
I, Julie Underwood,
Having been appointed city manager
having been appointed city manager
of the city of Mercer Island,
of the city of Mercer Island,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully and impartially
that I will faithfully and impartially
discharge the duties
discharge the
of
duties
the office of city manager
of the office of city manager
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
while upholding the provisions
while upholding the provisions
of Chapter 35A 13
oh,
RCW
gosh, of Chapter 35A 13 RCW,
and that I will support and maintain
that I will support and maintain
the Constitution of the State of Washington
the Constitution of the State of Washington
and of the United States of America.
and of the United States of America.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So to Julie's family, I anticipate this will be the first and last council meeting you will attend, and we're pleased to have you here. But we expect that you'll head home shortly for kids' homework or bedtime. So yeah. All right, we come now to appearances, moment when anyone may address the council who wishes. You have 3 minutes. The lengthy rules of engagement are on the back door, but the short rules are please just be civil. Please begin by introducing yourself and giving your address. And so off we go. Welcome, Peter.
Good evening and Happy New Year. Excuse me. My name is Peter Struck, and I live at 9130 Southeast 54th Street. First, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Ms. Underwood and hope that her experienced and professional and unbiased fresh perspective on city matters will serve us all very well. In November, the Council issued a statement following the recent presidential election that outlined the way it wished to conduct business in the community. The statement covered a number of principles, as you know, but I'd like to highlight just one this evening, the one that states our role is to bring people together, not divide them. Tonight, I believe you have an opportunity to make good on that pledge. As you know, a group of citizens under the banner Concerned Citizens for Mercer Island Parks filed petitions last year that asked the Council to put the issue of the appropriate use of parkland to a public vote. We have here before you a stack of petitions signed by 2,285 non-duplicated Mercer Island registered voters that do ask for a public vote to be held. Indeed, as more details are revealed about the size and scope of the project, more and more voters have expressed concern. Now, to put that number, 2,285, in perspective, last year, if you recall, you quickly backed down from your proposal to build an underground parking structure on Kite Hill, when less than 700 registered voters or individuals signed that petition. In addition, the library remodel was another recent matter that took strong and extended citizen pressure to spur the Council into action to preserve our library. Another way to gauge how strong citizens care about an issue is if they contribute money to further that cause. Based on an analysis of Public Disclosure Commission records, the 4 city council races that were held in November 2015, and many of you were involved in that, there are more non-duplicated contributors supporting the parks initiatives than there are for any of the winning campaigns in those races. And finally, over the past year, the parks issue has generated more letters to the editor of the reporter than any other issue. I think you get my point. So quite frankly, with all the issues that you're going to deal with this year, including I-90 mobility, parking and traffic congestion in the town center, residential building codes, just to name a few, this is an easy one to put to bed. It's time for you to reconsider and reverse your plans to donate public parkland to a private group for their building. Indeed, the measure of a person is to learn, readjust, and move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Meg Lippert, 4052 94th Avenue Southeast. Welcome, Ms. Underwood. I look forward to supporting your work for our city in whatever ways are helpful to you. Mercer Island citizens have a strong history of protecting our parks from development. Since 1969, through citizen action and/or ballot measures, Islanders have prevented the following from being built in our parks: a golf course, a new city hall, a new fire station, a restaurant, and just last year, a parking garage. But regardless of this community passion for protecting public parkland, you, our city council, have agreed, without a vote of the citizens, to lease almost 1 acre of Mercerdale Park, including the entire Bicentennial Park, for construction of a regional art center to be built by a private nonprofit group known as Mercer Island Center for the Arts, or MICA. Over the past few months, citizens are discovering that MICA requires not only changes in city zoning, such as allowing building in parkland, but also violations of the Mercer Island City Code, such as selling alcohol on site, which is prohibited in our parks, and even lower environmental standards, such as reducing the wetland buffer by half. And in addition to all of this special treatment, MICA's proposed budget includes a $2 million contribution from our city to their building fund at a time when you, our city council, recently announced you are not clear how you will meet expected future budget shortfalls. Furthermore, MICA has no endowment and has published no business plan to protect our city from having to bail MICA out if MICA cannot meet its annual operating expenses. New information about MICA's plans is emerging bit by bit. For example, MICA now plans to increase their paved fire lane through the park by over 5,500 square feet. It is beyond time for you, our city council, to listen to the thousands of citizens who want to preserve our public parks, citizens who signed our petitions in spite of vociferous, repeated interference by MICA supporters, including a current city council member. The good news is that a generous Mercer Island resident has publicly offered to donate $1 million to jumpstart a fund to buy private land for MICA in town center. This could include a parking garage, and it would not require change zoning, city codes, or environmental standards for a private group that has friends and allies on the city council. Now it's time for you, the city council, to take 3 actions. 1, to cut loose MICA's existing hold on public parkland. 2, to stop spending city staff time and resources on special city code changes and exceptions from MICA. And 3, to focus city staff time and resources on working with Sound Transit to mitigate the effects of light rail on travel to and from the island. Please listen to thousands of citizens, registered voters of Mercer Island. Please protect our parkland for our children and our grandchildren, your children and your grandchildren too. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. Welcome, Julie. My name is Elizabeth Hardesty. I live at 2283 72nd Avenue Southeast, Mercer Island, and I'm not here about the parks or about mobility, but I am a member of Sustainable Mercer Island, so I'm here in that regard. 2 things. I want to thank you, and I want to give you something that might be useful going forward. Thank you for your November 22nd pledge and reaffirmation of principles. There were 10 points, and it was very comforting to read. It was a message of decency and responsibility, especially in light of the changes that may be coming forward from Washington, D.C. this year, to know the solidarity and the commitment that you all have for all of our well-being here on the island, for the values we hold dear. which we're going to have to work at ever more strongly, we understand, in the future. So principle number 4 spoke of your commitment to protect our natural environment. And I know this doesn't seem immediately urgent, however it is, just a little more distantly. And that for our children and our grandchildren as well as ourselves. Well, I'm a grandmother. I've lived here for 46 years. And I raised our family, me and my then husband. And I now have 3 grandchildren in the elementary and junior high and high school here in the public schools. My oldest son and his wife moved back here last year, and they're all very happy. They're doing well. And the kids are learning about earth science and climate change, which is great. So that brings me to the second thing, what I'm bringing you tonight. And I made a copy for each one of you with your name on it. And I hope you will tend to it, because as you're working to lead us on Mercer Island forward in protecting the environment, which requires forward-looking and real muscle because it's not as urgent as the other things that crowd in. And thank you for your very hard work. Our greenhouse gas emissions, as you know, are going up, and the temperature is going up, but one does meet the occasional climate skeptic, even here in the Pacific Northwest. And even on Mercer Island, some people are not as well informed as they might be. So, here's the chart, and your name is on one of these, and I hope that you will keep this for reference. I used to give the Al Gore talk, An Inconvenient Truth, here on the island almost 10 years ago. I gave it quite a bit, and I've been active, and I look things up, and it's not hard to find the data. I'm sure you have it yourself. But this is totally the core. This is from Mauna Loa in Hawaii. It's the Keeling curve. It's the CO2 levels from 1960 to the present, going up day by day. And this is...
Elizabeth, I'll ask you to wrap up.
Okay. This is the surface temperature and how it's going up. Please keep this handy so that you know it and have it in mind. It's only getting worse. It's accelerating as you lead us forward as an island to diminish our carbon emissions, to give our children and our grandchildren basis for hope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Dr. Jonathan Harrington. I live at 9514 Southeast 68th Street. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome our new city manager, Julie Underwood, to Mercer Island. Over the years, I and many others have worked to promote sustainable development on the island. While reading your bio, I was especially impressed by your past association with 2 communities that have developed some detailed and comprehensive sustainability action plans: Shoreline, Washington, and more recently, Daly City, California. I remember reading the Shoreline Plan back in 2008 when the city of Mercer Island was also exploring strategies for promoting sustainability and addressing carbon emissions. And we got many great ideas from that document. The Daly City document, which is entitled Daly City's Green Vision, a Climate Action Plan for 2011 to 2020 and beyond, is especially impressive. It includes 10 specific, trackable, and quantifiable goals that guide future development. The first of these goals is, I quote, adopt a general plan with measurable policies for sustainable development. I happen to have a copy with me, and I'd like to enter it into the record. As Mercer Island embarks in earnest on its own long-term development visioning process, we are very pleased that the City Council has picked such a well-qualified and capable leader to guide us into the future. And I'd like to wish all of our public servants a Happy New Year.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy New Year, and thanks for your service. My name's Roger Shannafelt. I'm an island resident, and I have a letter I just submitted online that I'd like to read. Dear Mercer Island City Council members, I'm very concerned regarding the changes proposed to the I-90 corridor that I believe may decrease the safety of the general public. I share this with you with the utmost sincerity and with a genuine concern as you are in the process of negotiating with Sound Transit on I-90 modifications. I lived on this island in the 60s and the 70s prior to the addition of the second floating bridge. The floating bridge at that time was a very dangerous section of highway. Specifically, during the 5-year period of 1970 to 75, there were 2,801 accidents, which resulted in 18 fatalities. This is from the Federal Highway Administration Final Environmental Impact Study. The reasons for this increased risks were due to the following stated in this study: lack of separation between opposing lanes of traffic, traffic volume overloads, reversible lane operations in adjacent lanes, curvature of the roadway, if you remember the bulge, deficient lengths of on-ramps and off-ramps for safe acceleration and deceleration, and narrow shoulders. Those were the 6 reasons cited. Now, our community in Puget Sound have been fortunate since the completion of Phase 1 and Phase 2 safety improvements to the I-90 Cross Lake Washington corridor that were completed in '89, as demonstrated by the subsequent reduction in accidents and fatalities. However, I'm deeply concerned that some of the proposed changes to I-90 and Bellevue Way associated with ST2 will reverse some of the gains we have made with respect to safety. Specifically, the reduction of the lane widths from the federal standard of 12 feet to 10.5 or 11 feet in some sections of the I-90 corridor, the elimination of the emergency breakdown shoulder lanes, which will be replaced by significantly narrower shoulders, in some cases only 2 feet wide, the proposal to have a reversible lane on Bellevue Way, which increases the likelihood of head-on collisions. Additionally, I have a concern regarding response times from either Seattle or Bellevue emergency vehicles to Mercer Island. Specifically, how often do Bellevue and Seattle emergency vehicles respond to Mercer Island addresses? What will be the response time, given that there is much narrower shoulder during peak commute hours, and what is the time if there is also an accident on the bridge? If such response times are increased, will the city consider having Mercer Island paramedics? And what would the cost be to the city? And should this cost be factored into the mitigation fees that you're negotiating with Sound Transit now? If such response times are expected to increase, which I don't know if you've considered that or not, will the city need to consider having a fire truck with a taller ladder capability, given the increased heights of buildings in the town center? What would be the ongoing cost to the city, and should these costs be factored into the I-90 mitigation fees? And lastly, I'd like to ask the city and Sound Transit, or to ask Sound Transit and WSDOT if they have looked into the so-called barrier transfer systems, or machines, also known as a zipper machine.
I'll ask you to wrap up, please.
Yeah, thank you. That are heavy transportation maintenance vehicles used to transfer concrete lane dividers. Such a machine is used in the Golden Gate Bridge in order to allow for separated reversible lanes, and perhaps such a system could have 2 applications. This is an interesting one, so I'd like you to consider it. Use of a barrier transfer machine to allow for a breakdown lane on the I-90 floating bridge, while also allowing such a lane to be shifted for an emergency access lane and scheduled maintenance for the light rail. There's room for that in the plan. And also use of the barrier transfer machine on Bellevue Way in order to achieve separated reversible lanes for increased safety by eliminating the probability of head-on collisions. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi. Happy New Year, everyone. My name is Sabrina Manos. I live at 4899 Forest Avenue Southeast. I'm part of a group of concerned Mercer Island residents who care deeply about the future of our unique community. We recognize Mercer Island is in the midst of negotiations that will dramatically and permanently change our mobility, safety, schools, businesses, parking, and ultimately quality of life for generations of islanders. We believe there is a once-in-a-lifetime chance for a win-win agreement for the island and the region. To that end, and because our community has entrusted you with our current and future well-being, we urge you to act now to negotiate the best deal for the city. The only scenario we see working is the following. Mercer Island, Sound Transit, Metro, WSDOT all must agree to a unified term sheet with specific terms that Mercer Island residents agree upon. Mercer Island must motivate Sound Transit and WSDOT to agree to this term sheet that outlines specific mitigations and compensations. Third, Mercer Island must immediately remove the shoreline permit that had previously issued. The Council's obligation to revoke the permit follows the letters of the Federal Highways Commission as, quote, new information indicating a proposal's probable significant adverse environmental impacts, quote, under WAC 197-116003B22, with respect to single occupancy vehicle eligibility contained in the original final environmental impact study referenced by the permit's application. By revoking the permit, Sound Transit and WSDOT will be motivated to negotiate a term sheet. This deal needs to have Mercer Island Sound Transit, Metro, and WSDOT agree to the following. 1, well-enforced single-occupancy vehicle access to the new R8A managed lanes between 405 and Seattle. 2, keep the Island Crestway ramps open to all traffic, not just HOV. 3, WSDOT must prevent cut-through traffic using technology on I-90, and Sound Transit would also pay for installation of cut-through prevention technology on the Mercer Island roads themselves and the ramps. 4, no bus intercept or turnaround on Mercer Island. 5, Mercer Island must get a park and ride, and we must be given permits as an allocation during peak hours and a future percentage on allocations of future parking issues. Additionally, we need to have more direct access ramps. 7, we need Metro to increase local intra-island bus shuttle services in the future. 8, Sound Transit keeps I-90 Center roadway open until it's absolutely necessary to close for construction. And 9, Sound Transit provides funding to address and mitigate other collateral issues like pedestrians, biking, emergency services, et cetera, et cetera.
I'll ask you to wrap up.
Thank you. These actions we advocate are consistent with the 1976 MOA and the 2004 amendment, the Mercer Island Schools District, Visions Mercer Island, Save Our Suburbs, and over 1,000 signatories of our petition that we started recently. This is a time when citizens of Mercer Island and the City Council must stand together to fight for our community for a win-win. Thanks.
Thank you. Next. Please. And if others could queue who are interested in speaking, just so we can keep things moving along, that would be great.
All right. Well, I'm coming at this in a little different way. Sorry, I'm Chad Parmenter. Live at 7340 Island Crest Way. And I am nowhere near an expert on the lack of mobility and loss of mobility that we're facing, but I want to just kind of give you my feelings about how things have gone over the last few years, actually. I'm hopeful that the discussion tonight can be one in which parties and opinions are heard. My observations over the past several years is that when change has been discussed on Mercer Island, it has stirred up feelings and emotions, derailing both thoughtful dialogue and listening skills. Fueled by passion, our interactions have become personal, and we end up with crossed arms, frowns, red faces, heels dug in, raised voices, all sides with few productive outcomes. I've been there. That was me. I get it. I'm hopeful, at least for tonight, we can be open to differing points of view, not necessarily to agree with them, but at least to consider them, as I think we are all here because we care about Mercer Island. My wife, boys, and I moved to Mercer Island in 2008. It appealed to us due to the small town feel, good schools, overall sense of community. Ease of access, both on and off the island, was a crucial element in our ultimate decision to move here. The lack of mobility caused by proposed actions, I believe, will cause known and unknown challenges for residents, people who work on Mercer Island, and visitors alike. I believe potential choices need to be further examined and experienced in real time to truly assess possible consequences. As a business owner, I've been contemplating moving my offices to town center from Kirkland in recent years. The uncertainty and unknowns and contention involving all development matters has caused me to pause and re-examine such a decision. Stay in Kirkland, move to Bellevue, or take a risk and come here. Bottom line, my decision will be based upon what is best for my staff and clients, not for me. I don't claim to be an expert on the issues at hand. That's actually why I'm here, to hear more about it tonight. I know there are a variety of interests, all with unique perspectives and arguments that may or may not be sound. I'm cautiously optimistic it's possible to come up with solutions to serve both the needs of a growing Puget Sound while at the same time preserving our Mercer Island quality of life. I contend we increase the likelihood of finding best possible outcomes through further analysis of choices, more open-minded dialogue, and some give and take. Let's not rush our way into becoming the next Mercer mess.
Thank you. Anyone else? Welcome.
Hi. Ira Appleman, 9039 East Shorewood Drive. I would also like to add my welcome to the new city manager. I started coming to these council meetings in April 1997, and I've missed about one meeting in 20 years, so I'm very familiar with what's happening in the city. The arrival of the new city manager is an appropriate time to review and retool the city's procedures. I'm particularly concerned about how the city council interacts with city staff. In our council manager plan of government, state law is unequivocal. RCW 35A13120, titled City Manager Interference by Council Members, provides, quote, neither the council nor any committee or member thereof shall give orders to any subordinate of the city manager, either publicly or privately. At the City Council Planning Session retreat last January, it came out that Councilmember Grouse was interfering with the city attorney, and that in 2014 he interfered during a city school district active shooter exercise. I also have emails that show that he's interfering with staff concerning his property on First Hill. I think the problem is the City Council's 1 hour rule, which allows council members to interact with staff directly, ask them to spend 1 hour on a subject, but has been abused to allow council members to interfere with staff instead of going through the city manager as required by state law. State law provides a remedy for these abuses, the city manager. RCW 35A13080, titled City Manager Powers and Duties, provides that, quote, the powers and duties of the city manager shall be, number 4, to see that all laws and ordinances are faithfully executed. In the last few years, the city has experienced a rush of resignations, departures, which I believe are related to the city not following laws and procedures. The last city manager, Noel Treat, an attorney, suddenly left the city and refused to return for a reception in his honor, even though he lives just a few miles away. The rumor was that Noel believed the council wasn't acting properly. With the arrival of a new city manager, there's an opportunity to get back on proper track. City Attorney Sand has been welcome addition, insisting that she be allowed to do her job, and she's been universally praised for that. The city manager should do her job and insist that council members not interact with staff, telling staff what to do or critiquing or criticizing staff work. Council member comments should be directed at the city manager or reserved for council meeting discussion. The 1 hour rule must be eliminated. Council member requests of staff should go through the city manager as required by state law.
Thank you. Anyone else? Welcome.
Hi, my name is Eric Rothenberg. I live at 8284 Southeast 82nd Street on the south end. I did not prepare remarks today, but I think many other folks that are here in support of the of what Roger and Sabir have presented regarding loss of mobility. I think there is a general feeling that we don't have enough data. There's going to be terrible backups that I think many of my fellow Islanders are afraid of, but are not sure of what that's going to look like. I've lived on Mercer Island for 20 years as a property owner and taxpayer. And I've had several instances myself where I required the services of Medic One. And it frightens me to think that if there was a distinct cut in the access to Medic One vehicles on and off this island, what we're looking at in terms of life and death. As we know, with heart attacks, cardiac arrest, and stroke, time is tissue. Every minute or two that it takes for a paramedic vehicle to get here or to get off the island to the hospital is that much less time for hopes of survival. And so 7 years ago when I had my cardiac arrest, I can shudder to think what would happen if there was a constriction for that access for that vehicle to the south end of Mercer Island. So I would hope that the council will seriously take into consideration what's been presented here, as well as all these people who have filled the chamber today for this issue specifically. It is something that I have a sense for that my fellow Islanders are not clear about what's going on, and it feels like this is being, pardon the pun, railroaded through without, like, the clock is going to run out without a full accounting and a full transparency of what Islanders want to have happen and want to see you do on our behalf. So thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Carol Heltzel, 8245 Southeast 61st Street. Regarding our loss of mobility issue and the sound transit situation, I am concerned that if we lose access to the HOV lane that we have been used to, that we will have 1,000 more cars per hour entering the general purpose lanes. And this will impact not only Mercer Island, but the region. And I think we need to make the region aware of how detrimental this is to everyone. Also, all of the changes that have been made recently in what is proposed are far beyond what was reflected in the EIS. So I think the EIS is not valid anymore, and Mercer Island should persist in getting a new one. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Steve.
Hi, Bruce. Council members, I'm Steve Marshall. I live at 8150 West Mercer Way. Last month, on December 2nd, I organized and moderated a conference on advanced transportation technology. Our first speaker was Peter Rogoff from Sound Transit. I'm here not only because I live on the island, but because there are a lot of things that have happened with transportation technologies, a lot of opportunities that weren't vetted in the earlier EIS. A lot of the planning that was done at an era, in a time that has long passed. It's now become clear that there are things that should have been looked at in the EIS that haven't been looked at. I know that the Council is considering what to do regarding a supplemental EIS or a redo of the EIS. I'm hopeful that if you are able to do that, we can put in the mix some of these newer transportation technologies, these newer ideas that will actually not only help us, but will help the region. They're automated, connected, electric, shared vehicles. There are a host of things that were discussed at the conference that aren't in the future, but are here right now, that weren't considered when we started looking at this, that can help not only us, but the entire region. You can help the cities that are south on 405, Kent, Renton, Auburn, where a lot of low-income people have headed down to. You can help Kirkland and Woodinville. The 405 corridor won't have rail on it. So what we need to do is we need to not only look at our own issues, but look at the broader region and make sure that we're working with the other cities. I can tell you right now, in working with the Eastside Transportation Partnership, which helped organize the effort, and Bruce, you're on that, as well as other mayors, they now get the fact that these technologies have moved forward at a much more rapid pace than people believed. And I think we can work with cities like Bellevue is very interested in working with us. There are other cities that are equally on board. Bellevue just passed a transportation levy. They're going to produce a position. We ought to be working with them on things that we can do if we can open up the EIS and have a review. And the thing to do is to do it before we run out of time, but before things are locked in. My concern is that we're going to lock in something that we'll wind up regretting in not 20 years, but in 5 years. So my hope is that you can figure out a way to stop the train, take time out. 7 years seems to be more than enough time to do whatever needs to be done on the rail, on the floating bridge part. I don't think we need a full 7 years. This shouldn't delay. But taking the time to think through these issues in a better way with new technologies ought to be the way we go. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hello, I'm David Giuliani. I live at 1960 82nd Avenue, Southeast. I'm also known as the Sonicare guy. And we've lived here since 1979. Before that, I lived in the Bay Area, and I witnessed the BART era. And BART taught us a lot about rapid transit. We saw the reactions that we're seeing today, which is nobody's going to take that thing. I just want to protect my ability to use my car. And pretty soon, no one could take BART because it was so crowded that there was no parking. And that persisted over the decades. And now the only realistic way to get around the Bay Area during rush hour is with rapid transit. It's important for us, for you, to make decisions that affect the long-term outcome. The decisions being made will be with us and our children and their children, and we must be very circumspect about the long-term effects. The good news is that technology is rapidly emerging that is revolutionizing transportation. This is a rare opportunity for us to make a decision as a region and as a city that allow us to take advantage of technology. Some of the decisions being made now are rather questionable. One specifically is that of how we're using the rapid transit roadway. If it's left to only allow trains to travel on it and does not allow the use of wheeled vehicles, then it's cutting out the prospects of these ACES vehicles that Steve mentioned. Steve and I work together as part of a nonprofit called the Washington Business Alliance. We're working with the region to master technology so that we can bring it into place and make sure that the designs being proposed by the various agencies all integrate around the convergence of accelerating those changes and installing them as fast as we possibly can to be realistic. So by changing that design aspect, which is reasonably straightforward, make it like the streets of Seattle, in which there are flush roadways so that you can have buses and wheeled vehicles as well as trains, we can have our cake and eat it too. We can probably increase the amount of traffic that can flow over that rapid transit access with software controlling vehicles in order to keep them safe. Imagine cars that are in the process of being designed now, which can link together electronically so that they can travel as little platoons, maybe only 5 feet apart, basically providing an electronically controlled train. Let's call it an E-train. So you could get in one of these little cars, drive it along with others, and the software will connect you together, and off you go. So this is one.
Wrap up.
This is one example. There are many others. We want to work with the city as well as the other cities to make sure we make the best decisions possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to both of you.
Hi, Tracy and Hudson Grambois, 8440 Southeast 82nd Street. Happy New Year's, everybody, and welcome to our new city manager. I hope that you last longer than our previous manager because we certainly need your guidance. Tonight, I will speak to you our legislative priorities, specifically item number 8, support for AWC, or Association of Washington Cities, legislative priorities. Last year, you unanimously voted on a legislative agenda which included support for AWC Public Records Act bill. This support was not based on actual bill language, but rather just what AW said they were going to support, which was strengthening the Public Records Act in response to changing technology and burdensome requests. And that came from your January 4th, 2016 packet. If you remember, I provided you update on February 22nd of what came of this, which was House Bill 2576. It died, fortunately, but instead of supporting open and transparent government, this bill would have allowed limits on the amount of monthly time local agencies spend responding to requests and prioritization of requests. So today you are asked to support AWC in, quote, modernizing the Public Records Act so that cities can continue to provide open and transparent government services to our residents, unquote. So I wonder if modernize is code speak for limiting citizens' access to the documents that rightly belong to us. I realize that it may be rather embarrassing sometimes for these documents to be revealed, but they are the citizens' property. So I did a quick search, and I did not find any public records bills that have been released by AWC or on the House or Senate website. So I asked you today to please think about whether you want to support something which you don't know what it actually says, and whether you would like to wait to see what bill may come out of AWC. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. And please, if there are others, if you could queue up so we can keep this moving. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Kevin Peck, and I reside at 6825 84th Avenue Southeast in Mercer Island. And I want to thank you all for your service to the community. And I'm here in support with other islanders, asking you to take all steps possible and necessary to protect islanders' access to the HOV lanes. Yesterday on public TV, I watched a replay of a prior council meeting, and at that meeting, Subi testified to the idea of temporarily closing the HOV lanes, I think on a one-day basis, to gain some empirical data to see what would happen and how it will affect Mercer Island, islanders, and the community at large. And I'm here to support that idea, so we have empirical data when we move forward to combat what the FAA and the Transportation Department want to do in regards to affecting Mercer Islanders. So I ask that we step back, gain some empirical data, and then move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close public comments then. Thank you very much. Oh, come on up. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Heather Cartwright. I live at 8204 Southeast 62nd Street. I'm here tonight as a concerned citizen, and I'm speaking to you because I believe in the public process. I believe in government, and you as our elected city council are our strongest voice as Mercer Island residents, particularly when it comes to I-90 mobility, working with Sound Transit, the Federal Highway Administration, and the Washington State Department of Transportation. You are our only voice at the table in many of those discussions. And I'm here to represent islanders that, quite frankly, are busy, too busy to come to council meetings. They're commuting every day to work, back and forth with dual working families. They've got children in school. I myself am one of those. My husband and I both work. I've commuted to the east side. I've commuted downtown. I've watched the degradation of traffic and commuting on and off this island over the last 10 years. And I'm quite concerned when a petition goes around that's talking about mobility. I sent it to 100 people last night, and almost all of them replied saying, "Oh my God, I didn't know this was happening." And they signed the petition. It's over 1,100 signatures. It's doubled in the last week as people returned from vacation and started to be aware of what's about to hit Mercer Island in June, and it's alarming. This isn't the first time that there's been I-90 issues, of course. We all know that. In fact, it prompted me to do some research, and in 1989, there was an article in the Mercer Island Reporter titled, "I-90 Wars Fought by MI Leaders." It's a great tagline. There's a great quote. It said, "When the dust finally cleared, the project had survived and Mercer Island had gotten almost exactly what it wanted." That's a fantastic soundbite, but the reality is there's a lot of work to make that happen. Jane Brom, one of our former council members, wrote a book, Mercer Island History. And she said, the project added a heavy burden to the work of City Council. More than 100 agreements had to be worked out with the state for replacements of water and sewer lines, routing of construction traffic, zoning of state-acquired land, reimbursements to the city for expenses. It certainly wasn't easy. There's a lot of documentation that it wasn't. But you as City Council leaders also know that the things that are worth fighting for and have the biggest impact are often the most worthy projects to put your stake in the game. And that's why I'm here tonight. Former mayors like Aubrey Davis, Ben Werner, some of our state senators like George Clark, Jim Horn, they're well recognized for the fight that they put forward for Mercer Island several years ago. And I'm here because I want to be here in July saying, Mayor Bassett, man, he went to bat for Mercer Island and he saved mobility. He allowed us not to spend an extra 40 minutes in traffic just trying to get to work and back so we can go to a kid's game or make it to Lake Ridge at the end of the island after an hour-and-a-half commute from work. I want to be here praising the City Council, and so I implore you to fight hard and to be aggressive with I-90 mobility. Thank you.
Thank you. So as is our policy, I'd please ask no cheering and also no booing. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Jessica Hagan. I live at 7515 85th Avenue Southeast, Mercer Island, Washington. I would like to discuss the fact that some emergency mobiles cannot get to the emergency fast enough, and I think there should be an extra lane for the emergency mobiles to get to the emergency, so less people would die, and it would be easier to get there instead of having to go from lane to lane. And yeah.
Well done. Well done. Yeah, you can clap this time. Rules are very fungible to suit my needs. Anyone else? Welcome.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. I just lost my notes. Well, I agree with everything that all the other previous speakers have so eloquently said. My name is Stephanie St. Mary. I was raised on the island, and I've lived here for over 35 years. I live here now. I live at 8221 Southeast 67th Street. And I'm really concerned about our town and our community. I'm concerned about the traffic. I'm concerned about the emergency access, as that nice little brave boy just said. I'm concerned about our real estate values. I'm a realtor here on the island. I've been in business for over 21 years, and I'm very concerned about the values. I see a lot of people ask time and time again, what's up with all this information about the reversible lane now? How am I going to get on and off the island? Am I going to be blocked on the island and not be able to get off in an emergency, in an earthquake, in any kind of disastrous situation? Or about on a daily basis, as Heather mentioned, busy families trying to commute back and forth, get to the south end of the island, back and forth. This is something to fight for, and everything I've read is indicating that I don't think that you guys are fighting hard enough. I think that you guys need to be going to the state legislators and asking for their help, because this is a very unique community. I love this community. I would hate to see it become a huge bottleneck of traffic with buses and I just foresee just a horrible situation if you guys don't start fighting for our community and for our rights and for the pristine community that we have right now. So it's time to start the fight and not let Sound Transit just bowl us over, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Hope. Trickle continues. Welcome.
Hi. My name is Rhon Tunein. I live at 6836 83rd Ave Southeast. I'd like to read a prepared statement. City Council members, I would like to remind you what we can accomplish as a community and as a city. If you do what former leaders of our island have done in the past, you can accomplish great things for our island. But it takes commitment to leadership, representation of the public interests, public engagement, strategic thinking, open meetings, and strong and smart negotiation skills and tactics. The people in this room and the 1,000+ petitioners are asking you to better represent us in your negotiations. In the 1989 Mercer Island Reporter article authored by former Councilmember Jane Brom and Lori McHale entitled Big Bridge Bash Draws 25,000, it describes an island celebration of Washington State's centennial. The celebration took place on the old I-90 floating bridge. The article cited at least 25,000 people took part in Saturday's bridge festivities, including some 10,000 who boogied on the bridge and awed over the spectacular 15-minute fireworks display put on by the city of Mercer Island. This was a fantastic community event that offered our community a celebration of the state centennial, Mercerversary, and the efforts of our city to enhance the I-90 floating bridge corridor. You, as the council, 30 years later, have the responsibility to ensure that Mercer Island's mobility is not harmed and uphold the 1976 MOU and 2004 amendment that cites, to the extent of any loss of mobility to and from Mercer Island based on the outcome studies, additional transit facilities and services such as additional bus service, parking available for Mercer Island residents, and other measures shall be identified and satisfactorily addressed by the Commission. The UW received $45 million from Sound Transit mitigation measures. Rainier Valley received $50 million of community funds from Sound Transit, and Bellevue received a $160 million tunnel plus $35 million in cash. Given the agreements made to Mercer Island in the 76 MOU and the 2004 amendment, and the fact that I-90 is our only transit option our council should be successfully lobbying Sound Transit and WashDOT for mitigation measures that are comparatively better. You, the council, solely determine our community's fate and whether or not our community will be having a celebration like the one in 1989 or a wake. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Welcome.
Thank you. Neil McDonald, 8403 East Mercer Way. I'm here on behalf of friends and citizens of Mercer Island to express my view on the mobility issue. I feel as if I'm probably one of the thousands of people here in the island that are waking up to what we're seeing happening, which is we're going to lose a lot of our ability to have the geographic infrastructure that we need to have in order to maintain who we are as a community. And this mobility issue is cutting right to that heart. Secondly, and sort of in parallel, all these issues that we're talking about here with mobility have suffered from a lack of public process. It doesn't feel like, or doesn't seem like, that the City Council has created the pattern, or that they have created the pattern of not conducting effective public process on a number of important community issues, and this has got to be number one. And if you think about those issues that we all face, this I put near the top. Public process takes time and commitment. It requires open, honest, and transparent dialogue between our elected leaders and the citizens you are sworn to serve. It requires timely practice, genuine public engagement, collection of data, sharing of data, listening, surveying, all the things you're doing here tonight, which are fantastic. But it's got to go to the next level, which is actually happen. Thank you for your service. Thank you for listening. I mean that with sincere gratitude, and I hope you can lead us forward on this path.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning, Bruce, or afternoon. Tom Acker, 24270 4th Avenue Southeast. I actually wasn't going to speak tonight, but I couldn't resist. I changed my flight to Shanghai so I could be here tonight, so I'm leaving tomorrow morning. And mostly I just wanted to say hello to Julie and welcome you and thank all the council members for their service. Help needed. A lot of wonderful speakers tonight, a lot of passion, a lot of information. You've heard the same information for the last 3 years. I think that you understand it, hopefully, and you understand the challenges our community is facing. What myself and many others are wondering is, what is the Rosetta Stone for working with the City Council? What help do you need from us? We don't know. And honestly, the communications that come out of the city, and this isn't a slam on any staff person, but they're confusing, they're oftentimes misleading, and they don't really address the issues. And on a city like Mercer Island, and any city, there is a very diverse population, a very passionate population, and a very well-educated population. And I think that the system drives the behavior, and the City Council has created a system that has oppressed the voice of the citizens. And what I'm looking for in this ad hoc ask is that you all tell us how we can help you. Because we're working the soccer fields, we're working the lacrosse fields, we're working the arts areas, we're getting more and more people engaged. These are all new faces here tonight. And so the word's getting out, and now what do you do with that energy? What are you guys going to do as a leadership team? Your job is to set policy and process and protect the rights of the citizens. And I know that there are some regional perspectives that you feel obligated to support, and I understand that, but the impacts that we're facing are impacts that are not just inherent to Mercer Island. I don't know of a better word right now since this is ad hoc, but the screw-ups that are about to happen have regional impacts. It's not just us. And when the school board writes letters, when I'm pulling my kid out of a private school next year to bring him to Mercer Island, as well as a lot of other people, there are impacts to our schools. We have not studied the environmental impacts, the traffic impacts, the engineering impacts to the level of detail that we need to. So please, improve the communications with the community and tell us, how can we help you? Because we are in this together. And I'm one of your most vocal critics, and I've been out there pounding the war drum for, 3 years now. And I haven't cracked that code yet either, Bruce. So whatever you can do to help me, help you, I'm in it to win it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Welcome.
Hello, I'm Tom Heltzel, 8245 Southeast 61st Street. I don't believe I've addressed the City Council since 2000 when we were all working together, and I mean working together, to stop the flight paths turning over Mercer Island, which would have been a disaster for our community. The reason I'm here tonight, reluctantly, is because I think we have another disaster coming. When we worked together in 2000, Rich Conrad, who I saw here to welcome Julie, and the City Council and the citizenry, the core of the citizenry, were in a very tight, open working relationship, working with the negotiations, working with the legal staff, working with the airport entities. I don't sense that happening now. I sense the negotiation going on and some sub rosa kind of thing with Sound Transit, and the citizens of the island pretty much in the dark, very frustrated by it. And I think we need to have more openness. I think we need to not let Sound Transits bully us into a situation where we are giving up any leverage that we might have to find a solution that is not only good for the region, but good for Mercer Island. Those are not mutually exclusive things. But we do need to take care of business for the island as well as serve our part of the region. Mercer Island is a choke point. If it screws up here, it's going to impact all of I-90 all the way in, and that's going to have other ramifications. So we are the choke point. We need to take care of the island. Sound Transit has changed the game since we all voted on the Sound Transit 2. They've changed the rules. They've moved the ball. They've shuffled the walnut shells. The EIS is most likely invalid today. It does not represent the situation that is being proposed or trying to move forward on a very fast track to get the contracts lit so that the situation is irreversible. And we need to take action to stop that irreversibility, get our points out there, get the EIS redone. If that means using the shoreline permit as a lever, we should use that, because that was kind of taken away from us in a, quote, good faith effort that Sound Transit put on the table before we could negotiate. It had to be done in good faith. Now they aren't operating in good faith. So we need to open this thing up, put a block on it, get our points made. There's been many good points made of the things that should be put into place before any substantial agreement is done. And I ask the City Council to work openly with the citizenry, aggressively like we did in 2000 to stop the airplanes from flying over, and move ahead on that basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate all the comments. A lot of thoughtful comments on a number of subjects, but obviously mostly on this loss of mobility issue. We're going to move to the consent calendar. We have payables, payroll, three sets of minutes, and Agenda Bill 5246, a fire collective bargaining agreement. Is there a motion to accept the consent calendar?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Anybody wishing to remove anything? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Excellent. We'll move to Agenda Bill 5234, I-90 Loss of Mobility Negotiations Status Report. Welcome, Kirsten Taylor. Yeah, are folks wanting to stick around? Should we get some chairs out?
I think we can squeeze in here, Bruce.
Okay. All right, we're getting chairs out. Kirsten, let's just hold for a minute while we're doing that. All right, those folks who are standing up should feel obliged to come sit down since we've got chairs for you now. All right, here we go.
All right. Good evening. For the record, Kirsten Taylor, your Assistant City Manager. Tonight, I am here to give you a status report on the I-90 loss of mobility negotiations. This is really an end-of-year report, updating what we have done a little bit looking forward. No big reveals tonight, just the business of usual, as usual, that we are undertaking. So I think it's important to start out the new year with a reminder of what Mercer Island's goals and negotiating principles are. And they are to secure access to the new R8A lanes within the context of our historic agreements, to limit and mitigate traffic impacts in and around town center, increase commuter parking options for Mercer Island residents, improve last-mile connections to light rail through innovative services and on-island transit options, minimize impacts of regional bus operations no greater than current levels, and requires safe, convenient pedestrian and bicycle access to light rail. So I want to give you a summary of what we did in the fall for our public outreach. We had 10 events with over 450 attendees. I think all of you were at least at least one of these events, many of you at several, from the farmers market to a chamber luncheon to meeting with the clergy association. So a large range of activities and outreach. So one of the new pieces...
Kirsten, if I could on that last one just for
Sure.
a minute, just a little pitch. We're still happy to go meet with other groups if they want to meet with us. So that cost us free. So happy to do it.
All right. So we are... we have scheduled an update or a public meeting in January. We've said that we would be coming back to the public. We will do a presentation, an update presentation at the Tuesday, January 17th council meeting. So people can go online to see that presentation. They can either come to the council meeting, they can watch it streaming live, or they can go to the city webpage and see it after Tuesday as well, so that they can get that update. And then the public meeting is scheduled for Thursday, January 19th, at the Community and Events Center from 6:30 to 8:30 in the evening. We're looking for public input and priorities on a couple specific items. So we have questions around parking for light rail and about resident access to light rail service and the new station. And we also will provide any updates that are available over the next couple weeks. So we are scheduling 2017 outreach. We are happy to deliver this outreach to new groups of interested residents. We will offer update presentations to our previous groups that we went out to see. We'll continue providing information to news media outlets, provide op-eds as needed. There's also ongoing updates to our city website. We have an e-newsletter that goes out every Wednesday, so citizens can sign up to get that emailed to them each week. and we do use other social media outlets to get information out to the public. And we have new materials that are posted in a document archive at our Mercer Gov website /I90_archive. Another thing we've been working on always are FAQs, frequently asked questions. We do hear a lot of questions. Sometimes there's, individual questions that we can simply answer, but sometimes we see that the questions are, they're coming in from a lot of different sources. So it helps us to understand that these are broad questions that we need to get information out. So our goal is to provide accurate and up-to-date information. And we've issued these approximately every month throughout the fall, in August, September, November, and December. And we do encourage the community to view them at our Mercer Gov website, Rail FAQ. So one of the recent FAQs was about Sound Transit's Mercer Island Park and Ride. So lots of questions about who owns it. Questions have been, why doesn't the city own this park and ride? So we wrote an FAQ that gave a little bit of the history. So the Park and Ride is owned and operated by Sound Transit, not by the city. It's never been owned by the city, and there have been no previous opportunities for the city to purchase the Park and Ride. It went from private ownership to the state and then to Sound Transit. And again, there was at no point was there an opportunity for the city to buy the Park and Ride. But we also will be asking for community input around parking for Mercer Island residents at the January 19th community meeting. Another FAQ has to do with future ramp closures and reconfigurations. The center roadway is scheduled to close in June 2017. The R8A lanes are currently under construction by WashDOT, and the R8A configuration requires changes to some ramps. Ramps that are closed are to the center roadway because the center roadway is closed to vehicular traffic. And we do have a new, what we're hoping is pretty clear diagram on the website that shows what those ramp closures and ramp modifications are. We've been having a lot of questions. People have misunderstood what they have heard about which ramps are closing and which ones are being reconfigured. So I do encourage people to take a closer look at that.
Well, and I'm kind of waving my pen towards Councilmember Wiesenthal, simply because you'd pointed out, I know in an email, that there, I believe there's a typo, or at least there was a typo in one of the FAQs.
We are always happy to make corrections.
Microphone, please.
Dave?
Sorry. Dave Wiesenthal, 2967 74th Avenue Southeast. All right, so this was a quote from the last one. Sorry to put you on the spot, Kirsten, but
Sure.
I think it's got a lot of people hyperventilating.
Okay.
So this is from the FAQ. Is the Island Crest Way off-ramp from eastbound I-90 closing? That's the question. No. WashDOT is not contemplating, this is the answer we gave, not contemplating a complete and permanent closure of either Island Crest Way tunnel. Light rail construction is scheduled to begin in June 2017. If FHWA August 5th letter stands, single occupancy vehicles will no longer have access to eastbound I-90 off-ramp exit at Island Crest Way, but high occupancy vehicles will be unaffected.
Yes.
It feels like we're mixing. The question is Island Crest Way off-ramp from eastbound. Is that correct, or is that a...
So there will be eastbound off-ramps from both.
So eastbound off-ramps are from Seattle heading towards Bellevue.
Right.
And the off-ramp...
there will be two, as there are today, 2 tunnels worth of eastbound off-ramps. There's one that goes from the slow lane of the freeway. That remains. And there's one that currently goes from the center lanes into a tunnel. That, if you drive I-90 today, you see construction occurring, and that construction is to move that off-ramp from the center lanes to the new R8A lane of the roadway. So that eastbound, there will still be access to a tunnel,
Yes.
both from the general purpose lanes and from the R8A lane. And so I think our FAQ doesn't make that statement very clearly, and
Okay.
we need to go back and tweak it.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
yeah. That was a good catch. And the HOV lane side will be open to whatever vehicles can be in it, and the question still afoot is whether that's HOVs only or whether that's HOVs plus Mercer Island traffic. So that's a to be negotiated still.
Okay. All right. So we've had another question about whether we can beta test the center lane closure before it is closed permanently. And I posed that question to WashDOT, and they responded that a beta test would not be safe. There's a certain amount of moving traffic, having to notify people, just the whole preparation for it. They don't see how that could be safely done. And they don't believe that it can accurately replicate the reflection of the future conditions. I've asked them for a little bit more information on that because I know that's people just, it feels like that would be a good way to test what those conditions would be so that we could use that information going forward.
But it seems like if we, not to close the center lane, but if we closed off, if we want to demonstrate what the disaster looked like, if we closed off the SOV access to HOV lanes entering from Mercer Island, say during a morning commute, we have a friend over here who has about 15 cop cars, I bet we could enlist. Shut that off and then do the traffic count as it has to migrate through the rest of the city. That seems like, rather than mess with I-90, we can experiment on our own, which is unpleasant for Islanders, but I think it would dramatically demonstrate the catastrophe.
And we did pose that question to WashDOT Sound Transit. We considered that. One of the responses we got was that it typically takes people not just a day or a weekend or a week to determine how they're going to change their driving behavior, but it will oftentimes take months for people to make those final adjustments.
Folks, I do have to ask that we
Yeah.
sit quietly. Thanks.
You're welcome. So we've also updated some web pages. Recent updates include information about the Sound Transit South Bellevue Park and Ride closure, the Sound Transit 2015 Mercer Island Park and Ride license plate survey, which is very interesting to see where people who park in the Mercer Island Park and Ride come from. There's an I-90 document archive if people would like to look at original source documents. We've tried to ensure that they're there. The FAQ page has been updated. The Mercer Island station page has been updated. And the on and off ramp diagram has been added. So the South Bellevue Park and Ride closure, as you will recall, the staff was briefed by Sound Transit at the December 5th council meeting. The South Bellevue Park and Ride is slated to close in February of this year. Sound Transit identified parking mitigations located in Bellevue. Council has raised questions about that, and Sound Transit is in the process of providing additional information to respond to your questions. Yes.
So Sound Transit said it could be closed as soon as February, but that there would be a minimum 2-month notice, and it would be somewhat based on their contractor. Do we now have February as a confirmed date, or is that still, quote unquote, the soonest possible?
With the recent holidays, I have not asked them about that, but we will get that update and let you know.
I think that's super important for us to have a very
a specific date.
Particularly if they've committed to a 2-month notification.
Okay.
Yeah, Jeff, sorry.
And I just want to state this slide stronger than you have it. Their presentation was highly inadequate in terms of planning for us and the things they were going to do. So I think they've got to come before us, everybody show up at that, and that's a way of demonstrating our displeasure with the amount of planning that went into the closure here and the parking that's going to be available.
All right.
And what plans they actually have for putting signage up at the Mercer Island Park and Ride to tell people where these other parking places, and please go there if you're not a Mercer Islander, et cetera, to do everything we can. But their answers were not adequate, and I think we need them back here.
All right.
Vince.
Yeah, I'm concerned about the response as far as we'll get back to you or we're gathering more information. You know, when dealing with them, you need to make sure you give them a set deadline, because obviously we don't know when they're supposed to get back to us. So that always concerns me. So when you talk with them, Kirsten, I'm not going to. I would just hope that you actually give them a firm deadline to get something back to us. The other thing that I'm concerned about is that when it does close, I don't know when we did our last license survey, but if it's dated, I'd like to see us consider doing one now to see how many off-islanders are parking at the Mercer Island Park and Ride, and actually do a few license surveys after the closure to see, because their whole argument is that they'll take that we should not be impacted, but I think our gut tells us that once that thing closes, most of those people are headed to the Mercer Island Park and Ride. And so I like to make sure that we actually have some data to show that actually there's more off-islanders parking after the closure.
All right.
I don't know what the cost of doing that is.
I believe they did commit to that.
Yeah, we previously asked for that.
We asked for that, and they
yes.
did commit, but I think that Benson's point is well taken in terms of
Well, let's get it in writing.
All
Haven't, verbal commitments are one thing, but let's get it in writing.
All right. Thank you. So this Mercer Island Station Design update, the city webpage has been updated with station design information. The station design, just as a reminder to the community, they went before the city's design commission 3 times in 2013 with their preliminary design. They had a 30% design open house in June of 2013. In 2014, the city attorney's office determined that the city did not have regulatory authority over the design of the light rail station. So a Mercer Island advisory group was formed with 3 design commissioners, 3 arts council members, and 3 city council members in spring of 2014. And this group, the MIAG, gave input at the 60% design, and there was also an open house where they received a lot of input from the community in 2014. And then they came back with a 90% design. And I think there's been a little misunderstanding about what 90% design means. In the world of architects, a 90% design is the basic design is done. The last 10% is completing construction documents. So when they came back to the Maya group, it was to show how they had incorporated the 60% design input, see if there were any last big red flags that needed to be addressed, and those things were addressed. And Sound Transit did release a narrated final design PowerPoint that there's a link on the city website to the Sound Transit website where you can see that. So our next steps. Oh, yeah.
I was under the impression that they had committed to also come and have a pre-construction meeting with the public and present the station design
Yes.
so that they could get, there are things that they could still do if the public felt strongly about it. But I think they owe us a visit and a presentation to the public of the station design.
So Jeff said 2 things, a visit and an opportunity to potentially change things. So
yes.
I'm seeing in your expression a desire to separate those 2.
Yeah. They are planning to do a pre-construction open house in April of this year. So that's the next meeting that they have scheduled with Mercer Island.
But unsaid in that is
It's-
that the design is
The design,
pretty well baked
yeah.
at this
They
point.
they're putting out their project for bid at this point. That was the update I got today.
Kristen, the last meeting that you and I and Wendy attended, which was in like October, is that
Yes.
right? That was open to the public as well, is that correct?
It was.
Yeah. Well, it was posted on the website, because I think we've heard some feedback. I don't know if this is cool to talk directly to you, but I think we've heard some feedback that said, I didn't know anything about it. But the truth is that there were, prior to my time and after, there were some opportunities to see what was going on. And in that last meeting, there were several members of the public that were there. So I think it was noticed, certainly on the city website. So I think we ought to be careful about saying that there was never an opportunity to see it. Right.
And I will ask, audience, we spin out of control quickly if we start having a dialogue this way. So I do have to ask that we not do that.
Okay. Yes.
One of the questions that I've heard repeatedly is, does that design include the pedestrian and bicycle circulation around that station? And I know we've had some conversations about it, but I think equally that might be information that the public would want to know. And again, of course, how does the public provide input around potential pedestrian and bicycle circulation?
Okay. We are continuing to work with them on 77th. They have their plans do include entrance, the entrance area on 77th. They have not designed the 88th or the 80th entrance because that's one of the areas that is being negotiated. And we have asked Sound Transit to participate in our Aubrey Davis Park master plan project because the station area also is part of that park master plan, and we want to obviously address that early. But they have committed to work with us on that area to address the pedestrian and bicycle issues.
And to clarify, that includes the area around the park and ride, which is really both immediate and long-term, I think, a safety concern that everyone has.
Yes.
Yes. Isn't it my understanding also that Sound Transit is still taking public comment, so interested citizens can still provide recommendations and suggestions for that last 10%?
People can submit comments at any time, but realistically, when they go to bid with documents, they're not being changed at that point. So I wouldn't want to give the community a false sense of what they might be able to accomplish with a comment at this time. With bicycle pedestrian planning, that still needs, that is still in the works. So definitely if people want to comment on that, that would make a difference. All right, so next steps. Negotiations continue. There are regular meetings with Sound Transit, WashDOT, FHWA to move discussions forward. Principals from each agency are scheduled to meet this month to determine alternatives to be implemented in the short term before the center roadway closes in June 2017, and which long-term alternatives will move to the analysis phase. And if at any point the city does not make progress towards its interests in these negotiations, the city has the option of other courses of action, and I believe is prepared to take those actions. Questions?
All right. Questions. Thank you, Kirsten. Debbie.
Just as I raised the question or concern about the vagueness regarding the closure of South Bellevue, we are throwing around June 2017, and there's 31 days in June. At what point do we have clarity from Sound Transit as to what that schedule actually looks like? Is it June 1st? Is it June 15th? Is it some other date? My sense is there must be construction documents at a minimum, but I think as much as The question is, how much does it actually change our negotiation? But every 30 days at this point does matter. It matters, if not in terms of the negotiation, certainly the potential mitigations.
Right.
So if and when and how can we get a date from them?
We have requested the construction schedule. They said they have a 20,000-page construction schedule, so I said I did not need to see that level of detail, but I want to see some detail of what they are doing and when, and for the whole construction period, from the time that they close the center roadway throughout the whole construction 6-7 year period.
So when would we expect to see that date?
Oh, the date of actual closure?
Yeah.
We will let you know as soon as we know. I mean, I think they often would prefer to save that date till the last minute, which would mean April, and we, of course, want to know much sooner than that. So again, we will press them again for a specific date. What June? Does it mean June 1st or June 30th?
Benson?
Yeah, certainly a number of people in the public gave testimony, expressed their concerns about safety issues. And these safety concerns have been raised for several months, years even. And frankly, the fact that they're still being raised, I'm just wondering if Sound Transit has actually released a final study regarding the safety of the operation of the light rail. I have a number of safety questions.
Yeah.
But the first one is simply whether or not they've actually released a study that discusses the operational limitations or safety concerns of the light rail on Lake Washington floating bridge. Do you know?
So, Councilmember Wong, we've forwarded your questions about all of those safety studies, and I think due to the holidays, I did not have a response today. I will be very hopeful that, and will press them very strongly to get a response for the next council update.
And you're meeting with them tomorrow, so you'll
Yes.
have an opportunity to press the question at that time.
Absolutely.
So it's just not the safety issues about the light rail operation, but also the concerns raised about what happens if there's a car
Yes.
accident on the bridge, or the emergency vehicles being able to get onto the island. So that'd be great if we can get something more definitive so we can get it out to the public.
Yes.
The other question I had that was tied that actually pertains to whether or not our police department and fire department have had a chance to weigh in or to look at the operations that would occur after the closure. And I don't know if they will be given that opportunity so that they can provide us their professional opinion.
Yes.
So,
And I think what would make sense to me is to come back with maybe as part of our next update, we can bring this information back together to address all the safety concerns.
Other questions? Thank you, Kirsten. That was great, and a lot of good information there, both in the wrap-up and in more of the detail. I do want to just say to the public for a moment, no time at this point in our process for public Q&A, so I won't. No, I'm sorry. This is Q&A. Yeah, the public has the opportunity during public comment to comment, but at this point, question and answer is a reference to the council's
But we would like to
opportunity.
encourage the community to come on January 19th. We will have our staff, and I'm sure our council will be there as well, and we're happy to answer any questions. And I can be available in the lobby if there's any specific
I
questions
just wanted
tonight.
to add, I appreciate, a lot of folks came out this evening, a lot of folks onto this petition. We appreciate public engagement at all times, and so thank you. Particularly appreciate when it's thoughtful and constructive input, and it was virtually all of that nature tonight. So thank you very much for that. And as we go forward, understand this council has heard you loud and clear and is trying hard to do all it can to achieve the outcomes that we all are looking for. We are your neighbors, and we want the same kinds of things that you want. So with that, I think, unless there's anything else, council members, we're set on this issue, and we'll move on. Thank you. And Kirsten, I'll leave it to you to then field questions in the lobby if you want to do that. I assume some folks are going to leave, so we're going to just pause for a minute to let folks do that if you want before we start on the next agenda item. if you're going to have a conversation, if you could do that in the lobby, that'll allow us to keep going, folks.
Or your the detailed analysis of Tim supplementing his preliminary answer for him about why he was to follow the Rhon.
Okay, great. Okay, here we go. We're going to move now to Agenda Bill 5244, Zoning Code Text Amendment related to religious institutions. This is a first reading, and we welcome Nicole Gaudet to presenting to Council. So welcome. Ed, if you could just pull the door closed, that. All right. Here we go.
Hi. So good evening. My name is Nicole Gaudet. I am one of the new senior planners that started here in August. So this is thank you. So tonight we're here to talk about a proposed code amendment. It is regarding impervious surfaces at places of worship. Reason why we're talking about this tonight is because there were concerns about places of worship having to go through a variance process we have when adding a residential use to basically what is a residentially zoned property, because churches in the city are located in residentially, or most of them are in residentially zoned properties. There are concerns about the time and extra costs resulting from the variance process. And so council instructed staff and the Planning Commission to consider a proposed zoning text amendment to deal with this, so that's why I'm here tonight. This proposed amendment is a new impervious surface exemption for residential use on a property with a place of worship, so they do not have to obtain a variance to allow the property to go over 40% impervious surface coverage, which is kind of the standard impervious surface coverage allowed. The proposed exemption would allow either 4,999 square feet of lot area or 20% of lot area extra impervious area on the property to allow for the residential use. And the residential use would include associated uses such as like a garage or carport or patio or deck, anything associated with that house. So a parsonage or rectory at a place of worship. So this went to Planning Commission last month, and they did recommend approval with a minor modification to the proposed language. And the reason for that is they wanted to make it very clear that this lot coverage exemption would permit the lesser of either 4,999 square feet of lot area to be covered with impervious area or 20% of lot area, so whichever is less. So you probably saw in your email, Councilmember Dan Grouse has responded to this proposed text amendment. And he had some comments, and we thought there was a lot of validity to some of these comments. There's some good clarifications he suggested. There is one comment we thought was probably unnecessary. However, we'll discuss that tonight. So I thought I'd go through these comments. This would be a good opportunity to discuss them now, and then we could make changes and be prepared if the majority of the council is in support of these, because it's, of course, it's up to the majority to support a proposed text amendment. We can make changes by the second reading. So his first comment was, does the exemption apply to floor area ratio as well as lot coverage? And this exemption is only for lot coverage, not floor area ratio. So staff is suggesting a modification to, if you want to see, you can look at your ordinance in your package, which is Exhibit 2, page 7 of Exhibit 2. About the middle of the page, you'll see the underlying text. That is the proposed code amendment. That's what was approved or what was recommended for approval by Planning Commission. So double I there, staff is proposing a modification to that language right there, and this is how it would read. It would be a residence and its associated impervious improvements, as described above, may only be exempted if impervious coverage does not exceed 4,999 square feet of lot area or up to 20% of lot area, whichever is less. So that is staff's proposal, and we can discuss this later. Comment 2 is clarify what lot area means in this provision. So we thought that was also a good idea. So our response, we'd add a new subsection. Actually, at the end of that section where we just modified it, then we'd add this next sentence that says, for these purposes, the lot area means the total area on which all of the improvements for the place of worship are located. So it's just kind of a definition of lot, because it might be a place of worship might have one large lot that contains everything. They might have multiple parcels with buildings and parking lots going over property lines. So when we're talking about place of worship, we mean where all of those facilities are located. It might be one or many lots.
So that would be aggregated,
basically.
Yes. Okay.
So help me, would you like to run all the way through this and then come back to individual questions, comments, or would you like to stop along the way?
That's
what's your
what I
preference?
was thinking, but if we could stop along the way. But
how many more slides do you have?
just one more after this.
Let's just go all the way through and then we'll come back.
Okay, great. So the third comment is, can they exceed 60% lot coverage? And our answer is no. We want to limit them to a total of 60%. So we'd add a new subsection, G3, which would state lot coverage exceeding 60% shall not be allowed, whether by variance per Mercer Island City Code 19.02.02D. That's the current variance we have for certain uses like places of worship, with the understanding that they already need more impervious area than residential uses because of parking lots and the size of the buildings they have and what have you. So whether they use that variance or by this exemption, they'll be limited to a total of 60%. And then his last comment is what happens when the residence is split from the place of worship. This is a code change that we think might not be necessary. However, we have provided some language in case you would like to include some language around this, and I'll explain. So there's two things to consider here, because when you look at his comments on his email, you know, he's talking about, okay, if it's split, if it sells, you know, he's bringing up a few issues. And there's a difference in ownership change versus change of use. Let's say one church sells to another church. That's just ownership change. The variance can continue, or that extra impervious area. It doesn't change the use that's granted them. However, if the use is changed, let's say a developer buys the property and then they want to subdivide the property. Well, then when they subdivide, each and every lot on that property has to come into compliance with the current code at the time. So when you have a change of use, that property gets brought back into compliance. So that's why we feel you don't necessarily need to address this by adding further language to this code section. However, if you want to, if you feel more comfortable with it, just in case there's something we missed, something we're not thinking of, here's some suggested language. And it would be another new subsection, G4. If the use of the property changes at any time, the entire property must be brought into conformance with impervious surface limits in effect at that time.
So,
go ahead.
So if, let's just say that the residence is built on a on one lot, that is, whatever, and if the place of worship, if they sell that one lot to a resident, are you saying, at that point in time, it's a non-conforming use, I would assume, but you're saying that the new owner would have to then change or at least tear up some of the impervious surface in order to comply? Is that what you're saying? Or do they buy a house that is a non-conforming use?
Yeah, well, if they bought it to use as a church, again, it would say compliance. But they just want to use it as a house?
Right.
Use the church as a house?
Well, no, let's just say that the church needs money. They decide, we're just going to sell the residence.
Okay.
So they sell it to John Doe, who buys a house now. Okay. So are you saying that when John Doe buys a house, they have to go ahead and comply with?
Well, the church would have to somehow split that house from their property.
Let's just say it's on a. Let's just say the house is on a separate tax lot.
On a separate tax lot?
Yeah.
Well, if it was on a separate tax lot, they probably would not need this exemption. If everything was separate, I guess it would be unlikely. I guess I'd have to really see an example of where that would happen. Generally, if you have two lots and one's just the right size for a house, where they're not giving up all their parking lot, because remember, the church has to stay in compliance. They still have to have a minimum amount of parking and, adequate ingress, egress. If they get rid of a part of what we consider their lot, they could come into nonconformance. I'm just trying to imagine my mind where they'd be able to just get rid of it.
Okay. Scott Greenberg, your Development Services Group Director. There's two scenarios I can see. One is the one that Councilmember Wong brought up, which is the church owns a separate parcel of land. Let's assume it's legally platted parcel of land, just happens to be next door to the main church property. They wouldn't need this exemption because the regular impervious surface requirements for single-family residents would apply. That's what this is designed to do. It's really designed to apply those standards to a rectory or a parsonage that's on the same parcel as the church property. So let's say it's an acre of property for a church, and they build a rectory on the church, and then later on they decide they want to sell that residence to someone else, no longer for church purposes. As they short plat that property, the lots that remain, so the short platted house lot and the short platted church lot, would both have to comply with whatever codes are in effect at that time. And that applies to any subdivision of property on the island. Does that help? Okay.
I'm still confused, though, because in the previous question, the concept was if it was a single or multiple lots, the methodology was to look at the aggregated square footage. And yet what you just said is if it's a separate lot, that in peeling it off, that it would have to comply with the square footage on the basis of a private residence. But yet those two aren't consistent. Because you were saying lot coverage exceeding 60%, and the idea was it was multiple parcels. You look at it in aggregate. Let's say you're looking at it, make it up, 100,000 square feet, that you would look at it in aggregate, even though it was divided across 3 different parcels. But what I just heard you say on this one is that if it was a separate parcel, they could have, in theory, on the basis of it being aggregated, built to greater than 40% impervious surface because it was part of an aggregated property, and yet it would have to. This is where I lose. This is where I'm not quite sure how it works out. I'm looking. You look. Yeah. You're nodding like you know what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to maybe if you can help me out.
I think I get it. So remember, we're limiting. Okay, so generally. Say there's a property with a house on it. It can have up to 40% of impervious area. this exemption only allows up to a maximum of 20% impervious area. So if this property, let's say you have 2 lots and it's spanning the use on 2 lots, if it has 40% or more impervious area, there might be some weird case, but there's almost a guarantee that extra impervious area is directly related to the use of the church, and they would not be able to just sell off that part of the lot. I don't know if that's...
I think I get it. I mean, the reverse situation, I think, is something that occurred, but I don't think it violated anything, so I want to make sure, which is when the synagogue on Island Crest, Shevet Achim, bought the property from the church. They eventually carved off 3 lots and sold those. And, of course, because they were empty, they're fine and they're fine. But if they had taken the whole lot and built up to the 60% with the... In Jewish, we don't have a parsonage. I don't know what we have, a house. But then they try to carve off lots that now reduce what remains of their property so that it's greater than 60% because they had built it out. They wouldn't be allowed to carve off that property and sell it to a private developer because they would now themselves be out of compliance, so they would never be allowed to short plat it and get rid of it. Okay.
Correct.
So that I get. That's good.
Thank you. And because they have to, this we're only allowing up to 20% extra impervious area. If you're going for that 60%, you've got to justify it. There's got to be a reason you're getting that much area. You have to need that for the church. So, but then again, this is just as a fail-safe. We can always include this. I don't think there's harm in it, but we're just, it might not be needed. But again, this is all open for discussion. It's a good discussion.
So, Benson, let me have a turn, and then I'll come back to you if you don't mind. So my question is sort of perhaps embarrassingly basic, but I will ask it. And that is, so we've sort of thrown around the terms parcel, lot, tax lot, and property. Are each of those terms clearly defined within our code language such that if I went and looked, I would know exactly what each one means? Because I've got this slight nervousness that property and lot are synonyms here, and parcel's something more clearly tax related. Help me out.
Mayor, I'm Evan Maxim, the planning manager for the city of Mercer Island. I thought a third voice would just be added entertainment at this point. So the short answer to your question is not all of those terms are defined in our code currently. The term lot is defined in our code. Parcel and tax parcel are essentially references to the same thing, which is the King County diagram of the property you're paying taxes on. Of course, in the case of religious institutions, there is no tax payment, but they're still assigned a tax account number, and that tax account number is describing a piece of real property, if you will. And then property ownership, of course, is actually a third distinct thing, which may or may not correlate to the other two in terms of layout. So it's a very good question, and not necessarily something we're always very explicit about as planners. The last, property and perhaps parcel, is something that we're thinking about defining further in your residential development standards update, which is actually why it popped up a moment ago. Just some of these terms, I think it would be better practice to have more clearly defined in our code, and it will be part of our cleanup exercise with your forthcoming amendments.
Okay. Thank you. Benson.
Speaking of definitions, is place of worship, is that defined? Because the question is really derived from the comment that was made before the Planning Commission, where the person indicated that or suggested that maybe he might be eligible. And so, so is it defined?
It is a term that is used. I'm double checking to see if it is defined.
Could somebody claim that because, again, that their house should be deemed a place of worship?
It is defined. And would you like me to read the definition? Or?
Sure, why not?
Okay. It's a church, synagogue, mosque, or other institution that people regularly attend to participate in or hold religious services, meetings, or other religious activities. It's 19.16 .010, and it's page 19-165.
Okay. Wendy, you've got your hand on the mic. So.
I'm just curious how many parcels, properties, or lots are religious organizations on this island, and how pervasive this issue might be as folks want to build housing for their religious leadership.
There's approximately 12.
12.
And I contacted them all just to see what the interest was, and there's one for sure who's interested. There are a couple that said, there's a number that said, we aren't really planning on this. There are a few that said, well, we appreciate this because in the future we might do this. So there's 3 or 4 that, maybe in the next few years might. The majority don't have any plans at the moment. So.
Can I go again?
Yep.
And then I'm just curious where you came up with the 499 square foot. I saw that in the notes. Thank you for including all the documentation, and I wonder what the answer was.
Yeah, it's an interesting number. So stormwater regulations are controlled by what's called a stormwater manual. Right now, the manual we use here is the 1992 King County Stormwater Manual. And there's a cutoff of 4,999 square feet of impervious area triggers a certain amount of improvements, and if you go over that, it triggers a lot more. So your typical residential use would, when you're looking at things you have to do to control the quality and quantity of water on your property by adding impervious surface, a typical residential lot will trigger the lesser of those requirements, the requirements that would be triggered by adding less than 4,999 square feet of impervious surface or less. So we just kind of matched it to that.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Don't go far. We may still require your assistance.
So, okay. I do want to do, so 2 more things I wanted to say. So again, we discussed some of Councilmember Grouse's comments. Please, if you have any comments, especially after our discussion tonight, something comes up, email me, and we can discuss those at our next reading. We can always make more amendments, and to let you know, we expect to have our next reading January 17th.
Okay. So at this point, I assume that you are looking for feedback from the council as to whether we'd like to see these additions added into the text as it comes back to us for the second reading. Is that correct? Do you need that in the form of motions, or are you looking for that to simply be... Scott says yes.
I think motions would be best.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. You could do the motion that's recommended on your agenda, Bill, and then you can say with the additions, from the PowerPoint presentation, or however you want to. Very good. However you want to say it.
And to be clear, staff's recommendation is that we go ahead and implement comments 1 through 3, and that 4 is optional, not to staff's view. Doing anything for us.
That would happen anytime that this situation would occur, the use of the change of use.
Okay. So 4 is essentially superfluous.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt anything, and I know Councilmember Grouse was concerned about clarity, and he usually is concerned about clarity, and that we don't think that's a bad amendment. We just don't think it's totally necessary.
Okay.
So, totally council choice.
So, I'm ready for a motion.
I move to set ordinance number 17C02 for a second reading and adoption at the January 17th, 2017 City Council meeting with the incorporation of the suggestions 1 through 3 in the PowerPoint presentation.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Nicole, thank you very much. Give us just 60 seconds of where were you before you were here, and what's
Yeah, so
what should we know about you?
So most recently, I was with the city of Briar, which is a small residential city in southern Snohomish County, right on the King County-Snohomish County line. I was there for 9 years, I think. So I went to school at Western Washington University. I have a degree in physical geography. I've been in planning for 15 years now. So I'm just excited to be here, and it's a new place to be and experience.
Well, very good. Yeah. Thanks very much, and thanks for getting us through this tonight. We'll see you at the 17th meeting for the second reading. Council members, keep going. We're 2 hours into the regular meeting. I see nods from some quarters.
Keep going.
Okay.
I'm walking out for a few seconds.
Agenda Bill 5245, code amendments to require installation of automatic fire sprinkler systems in new residential construction and substantial alterations. First reading. Welcome, Chief.
Good evening, Council. For the record, Steve Heitman, your fire chief. I am not here to talk about I-90 loss of mobility. I'm here to talk about Agenda Bill 5245, as the Mayor pointed out, which is recommending code amendments that require the installation of automatic fire sprinklers in all new residential construction and substantial alterations. The current ordinance that we have was adopted in June 2004. It is a simple ordinance, but in new construction, it requires automatic fire sprinklers in any residence that is over 5,000 square feet, including townhomes and two-family residences. In addition, for substantial alterations, it requires automatic fire sprinklers if the addition or alteration takes the gross square footage of the floor plan over 5,000 as well. In 2015, as part of the required construction code update, the International Residential Code put in language that requires automatic fire sprinklers in all single-family residences, two-family homes, townhomes. And what the state did with that was they then took that language and they put it in an appendix. And that made it so that each jurisdiction, even though they adopted the International Residential Code, did not have to adopt that language. They can adopt it separately through their own means and adopt that portion that requires those automatic sprinklers. We also, with this, wanted to look at including the substantial alterations, as you know, which is substantial alteration is defined as any type of construction project that costs 50% or greater than the assessed value of the home. When we brought this to Council in October during the study session, Council seemed to indicate strong support for the new construction ordinance and requiring automatic fire sprinklers within that, but had some concern as far as the substantial alterations and the methodology that was being used at that time. We had proposed a new type of methodology because King County changed the way that they were assessing the values of homes. And basically, how they did it is they valued the land much higher than they did the structures. So if you purchased a home for $1.2 million, the county decided to only value your structure at $300,000. Therefore, if you did a remodel that cost $150,000, it triggered the sprinklers. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to be a little bit more fair to the homeowner. If you spend that kind of money on a home, then a substantial alteration should be a substantial alteration. With that, we went to the Public Safety Committee and we offered 3 different methods for determining what a substantial alteration was. And those 3 methods were a set value, a percentage of renovation value, and a percent value. The Public Safety Committee showed support for the percent value that we wanted to utilize, and that was the one that we had strongly recommended because it's based upon a formula that the council has already approved that is used in order to establish permit fees based upon the valuation of the property. And so we wanted to be consistent across the board. We didn't want to have one type of value used if they went to the DSG and then another type if they went to the fire department or had that part of that code. With that, we also have the issue of non-substantial, which is the 10 to 50%. And so just to be clear, if a project exceeds that 50% or greater threshold for substantial, they're going to get the fire sprinklers. If they're below that, they're going to be required by code to have a fire alarm system. But we will also evaluate them on certain criteria that they're required to meet the fire code. And if they have a certain number of deficiencies or they present a hazard that's great enough, even those that are only in the 10 up to 50% can still be required to have a fire sprinkler. But it's on a case-by-case basis, so there is no set algorithm in order to say this is how many we're going to be doing. That is on a case-by-case basis through the fire marshal's permit review. I won't go over the benefits unless you require that, since you've had time to read this and this has been ongoing, but there are a number of substantial benefits from fire sprinklers, including the saving of lives, reduced property damage, those sorts of things. Costs and impacts. We've had a number of conversations with the sprinkler contractors who mainly work on Mercer Island, and found that the average cost is between $2 and $2.50 a square foot. Now, that is for the installation. Yes, there are peripheral costs for that, but that is for the installation of the sprinkler system itself. As part of this process, and as we had told you in October, we had sent out and organized 2 public meetings for the contractors to come in and speak with us and give us their feedback as far as what we were proposing on that. We didn't have a great turnout, but the turnout that we did, some of the contractors came in. They were a little bit standoffish at first, but once we explained what we wanted to do, what we felt the benefits would be, what those costs would be, they tended to actually show some support for it, which was good to hear. The costs and how that would affect them were the 2 largest things. One of the byproducts of what we're proposing, which again is a good thing, number one, we want to do it for safety, but number 2, we want to help in the process that we currently have for the city. When someone submits for a plans review, it has to go through a fire review. That process can be elongated up to weeks by going back and forth if they're not meeting the fire code. And remember, the fire code is a minimum. It's not a maximum. It is a minimum standard that you have to meet. And so to get them to that minimum, a lot of times it's a fire sprinkler, but there are other options. But what this typically can do is it can cause a back and forth between that thing can then cause delays. So what we want to do is we want to try and streamline the process and make it so that we have better communication with the citizens that are doing these remodels so that they know from the beginning what it is that's going to be required of their project. The contractors are actually very happy about this because they get caught in the middle of this, that there are unexpected costs, whether a house was designed to be under that 5,000 square foot level, yet they're still required to have sprinklers or other issues that come up. If they can have those costs up front, they feel that that's going to be a much better process in the long run. And so we've gotten from the input that we have from the contractors good feedback on that as well. So what we're recommending from all of that is we're going to move to suspend the City Council Rules of Procedure 5.2 requiring a first and second reading of all ordinances and ask you to adopt ordinance number 17C01, amending Chapter MICC 17.16, requiring residential fire sprinklers to be installed in all new single-family, two-family, IRC townhomes and substantial alterations. Or move to set ordinance 17C01 to January 17th, 2017 for a second reading. Open it up to questions.
All right. Thank you. Council members, questions? Benson.
Chief, as far as the valuation, obviously we're not going to be using, or you're not proposing to use the assessed value anymore, but can you elaborate on the actual valuation method that you mentioned that DSG uses? And then where does somebody find that? I guess in this whole process, it really doesn't describe where somebody can find the valuation or method.
Right now, currently, that formula is set that it is basically set at a fee of $156 per square foot, gives that estimated valuation. And what we're going to do to improve that communication is on our website. We already have links to fire sprinklers and what's needed and the requirements there. So we're going to add that information there so that, again, it's clear. And then also, when they come in for their permit at the intake screening, we're going to put that information on that document as well.
So just so I understand what that means then, so you would take the number of square feet that are being remodeled and multiply
for the
that?
Property, not the remodel. We want the valuation of the property. The homeowner is going to provide us, or for the home, thank you. The homeowner is going to provide us the valuation of what it's going to cost for the remodel. And so we're going to figure out, let's say you have a 5,000 square foot home, then we're going to take that times 156. That's going to give us the overall value, and then anything in excess of 50% of that will be considered a substantial remodel.
Okay. Other questions? Wendy.
Thank you for all this information and all the background. And I'm just curious why only 4 cities, Kenmore, Redmond, Bonnie Lake, and Tukwila in King County, have adopted this. Can you give me a little more context about what's happening regionally with required sprinkler systems and new construction and significant remodels?
Regionally and nationally, there's actually a very big push for sprinkler systems, but there's a lot of pushback as well. The Master Builders Association has a lot of pull, and so a lot of areas are not taking this on because of that pushback. One thing unique to Mercer Island is, as we had said previously, right now with our current process, we're already putting sprinklers in about 85 to 92% of the homes that are falling within these categories we're describing. To do this and make it a requirement in all new construction is going to bridge that gap. So we can only assume, because we haven't heard back from the Master Builders Association, that because we're already getting such a high number, it's not a big reward for them to stop us from doing this. And in talking to the contractors, again, we're doing so many that they don't feel that it's a big financial impact as far as the community as a whole.
I'll weigh in here. I don't know if others had the same call I had, but I was called by the Master Builders who wanted to give me their opinion. And what I heard in their comments was a concern that while Mercer Island probably was far from the poster child for low-income housing, low-cost housing, they saw us doing this as setting the stage for other cities adopting similar changes, and that would impact affordability of housing in other more affordable communities with smaller homes and such. So they were concerned that this represented a step in a direction that would affect housing affordability in the region, because we not because of what happens here, but because of this example that gets set. Doing not a very good job, particularly of summarizing their comments, but that's the best I could do for you.
Add to the cost of
It adds to the cost of the home. And
housing.
Yeah, that's right.
Hi, this is Herschel Rostov, Fire Marshal. I guess I would add to that is kind of add to what the chief said, which is that Mercer Island is such a unique layout and design that is so different from all the other communities around. We have long, windy driveways. We have infrastructure of water mains and things that can't be looped because of ravines. And so it gives us lower water pressures, lower gallon per minute flows. And so because of that, other cities naturally have a lower percentage of sprinkler buildings already. And so if they were to institute a sprinkler ordinance, the move from what they're currently installing to what the ordinance would cover is 80% in a lot of cases. And for us, we're talking 8 to 10% of a change. And so I think that that's one of the significant differences between those other cities not pursuing it and not being able to have that effect yet. Where here it applies more to us because we're already doing this because of the topography and the difficulties on the island.
Dave, and then back to Wendy, I think.
So I think you answered one of my questions. I have two quick questions. One is the percentage of remodels today that require sprinklers because of other mitigating factors. They don't have access, they don't have line size or flow, fire flow. Mm-hmm.
You're getting there. You're getting there.
And so that's 85% of remodels are qualifying for sprinklers? Or did I mix those two numbers up?
We don't separate them in the permit database for remodels, so I don't have specific numbers for remodel projects.
Okay.
We're speaking for new construction, the first part of the ordinance, which is the 85 to 92% is currently being installed.
Okay. And then, because I think it's remodels that have, or the people that I'm hearing from, that have them the most nervous, that it could kick a small project suddenly into a big project because of the retrofit and the rest of the house. The other question sort of related is, speaking of remodels, do most existing residential water meters have enough flow to supply a sprinkler system?
It would depend. It really depends on where that threshold of remodel is. Each individual house is going to be different. And so what I've seen anecdotally on doing plan reviews is that if we were to change the valuation method so that we really are having a significant remodel instead of applying significant remodel rules to a house that's getting a small remodel, which is what we're currently doing. If we move that bar a little bit so that there's more work getting done on the house, then there tends to be more fixture units in plumbing that's happening. There tend to be additions of more bathrooms. Those things trigger new water meter infrastructure and new supply line infrastructure in the remodel project anyway, and we would use the same system. We wouldn't require an upgrade. So by moving this line, we're actually putting this in a mode where we're having it affect perhaps fewer houses, but have it in the right light, where we're really having a 50% remodel. A substantial alteration is the one that's getting hit with the sprinkler system instead of having a sprinkler requirement that we currently have for houses that have less remodel going on.
So perfect answer. Let me ask it in a different way. In your experience, do most remodels require new meter sizes and, in fact, water connections to the street?
In my experience, currently with our system right now, we're probably about even in needing a new meter or not needing a new meter.
So half and half.
Half and half, yes.
Thank you.
And that's my experience. Moving to the new system, if we do that new valuation method, then it's going to drop significantly because most of those houses would have the meter already as part of the remodel project because it would be a more substantial remodel.
Thanks.
Wendy? And then Jeff?
So I'm struggling with the new construction versus the significant remodels, and my interest here is after years of hearing from friends, neighbors, and strangers complain about sprinkler installations and remodels that require all this. I'm thinking about the taxpayers and residents in the 10 to 15% who live across the street from a fire hydrant in Mercerdale Park, right? Like those 10 to 15% that wouldn't need the sprinklers that now would if they want to rebuild their house. So my interest is in trying to save those folks from the pain, angst, surprise, and upset that comes with having to do this when they wouldn't have had to do it before. And my understanding is that the review process and approval and study of deficiencies and study of fire flow and all of that isn't going to be significantly different if we can still protect those 10 to 15% from having to do this. So can you help me understand a little bit more of the cost benefit of bringing those 10 to 15% into the sprinkler umbrella with doing this?
That's ugly.
Yeah, so it's the two issues of...
Well, it's kind of a balance because, as the fire marshal just said, there are going to be some that currently under this current system are going to be required to upgrade their meter and put in a sprinkler system where they wouldn't if we change that. So balance them with the 10 to 15% that don't have to do it now. The bottom line for that 10 to 15%, you're going to be living in a more safe home. You're going to have a higher life safety factor with that home. If you do unfortunately have a fire, you have the potential, depending on insurance, for reduced rates with that. So there's a cost savings there. Yes, we can't make everybody happy.
Right. And my understanding is the cost actually is significantly more than $2 to $3 a square foot for this, after you look at all the work that goes into it. So, and then the monthly fee to maintain the system afterwards.
There is no monthly fee for a fire sprinkler system. It's an annual testing that has to be done. If they want to have it monitored, then that is an entirely different item for them. But no, there is no monthly fee.
Unless there's a deficiency in a code alteration. So it's all dependent on the property and the project that's in question, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, and I think an area that gets confusing is cost, and it's a key issue here is how much does it cost to install a sprinkler system and how much does it cost to maintain it. Right. And I think that there's a wide variety of installations out there in the world, and I think we're mixing in some pieces of fees that don't really apply and don't really happen very often. So I just wanted to clarify a couple things. The sliver of code change that we're talking about, that 10 to 15% that we're talking about, is for houses with minimal deficiencies, or they would have already been getting sprinkler systems due to the old system. So we're talking about a sliver of buildings that has minimal fire deficiencies. The buildings that have minimal deficiencies are not going to get the Rolls-Royce of sprinkler system. They're going to get a standard 13D sprinkler system. That system goes in without monitoring, so there's no fire alarm component, there's no monitoring component, so there's no monthly fee. These systems can be installed in a system called a flow-through system. For people who are into the technology, that means that you don't even have a backflow preventer on your system. The reason I bring that up is the backflow preventer is the one piece of a sprinkler system that requires testing on an annual basis. So they make systems now that don't even need the backflow preventer. So there is zero testing that is required on an annual basis, no monthly fees. And things like the water meter, we changed our approach 2 years ago to the water meter size. And we currently allow the installation of a 1-inch meter, which is the city minimum size meter anyway. And we don't require an upgrade to a larger meter for a standard 13D sprinkler system. So there is no meter upcharge fee at all. It's the same exact meter that you would put in if you had no sprinkler system versus having a sprinkler system. So one of the confusions is that little pieces are getting added to this price pool that make it sound more expensive than it truly is. And I spent a lot of personal time with contractors. We pulled actual contracts of installations of 400 projects over that 5-year time period. We looked at the numbers and we took those and actually looked at Mercer Island installations and what those costs were. And so while globally the cost may be more expensive in other areas, and we have some Rolls-Royce systems on Mercer Island where we have really hard driveways and things like that, but the average system is not going to cost those. They truly are in the $2 to $2.50 range, and I've seen the bills that these companies have charged the homeowners for the installation. I've seen them myself.
Last question.
Sure. And then over to Jeff.
And so then I've heard from a couple people who've installed these sprinkler systems, and then they had a flood, and then they had a huge homeowner's claim. Do we have any data about how often these sprinklers might fail and cause another problem that wasn't intended?
The NFPA study is what I can base that on, and the NFPA study says that they're not any more susceptible to leaking than any other plumbing system in your house. So if you think about that, you have water in pipes feeding your sinks, your toilets, every other part of your house already. They're using the same piping, and even in this flow-through system I mentioned a minute ago, they actually are using the plumbing pipe that feeds your toilets. It's the exact same pipe in the building. So there shouldn't be any any reason that your plumbing pipe that would lead to your toilet would break or flood more than a sprinkler system pipe would.
Just the 15 sprinkler heads spread throughout the house.
It's not more piping. The piping is the same type of pipe, and it runs throughout the building like your other plumbing would. One of the inspections we do as part of our installation is, we call it a tenting inspection. We actually go and make sure that there's actually insulation over the top of the pipe so that it is maintaining that warm temperature and that it's keeping from that situation. And I will tell you, in 18 years of being on a fire engine myself before I ended up on this, I went on one sprinkler pipe breakage on the island in 18 years, and that was a family that had left the country for an extended period of time, had turned their heat off, and it was 30 degrees when we went in the house, so it wasn't getting any warming from the house itself. So it wasn't a condition that would be normal in any other house. So,
Jeff.
Yeah, I rather do this as a question. I think, Carrie, it might be for you, as opposed to during discussion. So you have one option here that's suspending the rules of first and second reading, and I know there's a former city council person that never liked this. We've done it in my 1 year here so far a number of times. Why would this be appropriate for potentially suspending? Because I think as a general rule, 2 readings is, especially where we have some people who might be objecting to this.
It's entirely within the council's discretion whether or not to suspend the rules and waive second reading, or to instead set this over for second reading at the January 17th regular meeting. So it's entirely within council's discretion whether or not to do that. And if a majority of the council doesn't agree with that motion, then the second alternative motion can be made instead.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, I'm wondering whether someone might want to make one or the other of those motions.
I move to set ordinance number 17C-01 to January 17th, 2017 for a second reading.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Jeff.
Thank you. I was going to do this when I asked my question, but thank you for the hard work you guys put not only into this, which I thought was outstanding, but also the service you guys do to our community, keeping us safe, and the spirit with which this is created, which is exactly in that spirit. So thank you. But I am supportive of making a second reading, because I think as a general principle, we should always do that unless it's really super obvious that we don't need to.
Anyone else? All right. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? So 5-1 on that. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I
See you on the 17th.
completely agree. It was obvious you did a lot of hard work on this, and it shows and it's appreciated. So thank you. We're at Agenda Bill 5242, final 2017 legislative priorities. Kirsten Taylor returns. You survived the lobby.
I did. Good questions.
Good.
All right. For the record, Kirsten Taylor, your Assistant City Manager, here to talk about, or to present to you, proposed final 2017 legislative priorities. So again, as a reminder about the legislative session, we use these city legislative priorities as a guide for work, 2017 work with our area legislators. They also allow the city to respond quickly and efficiently to issues of interest, and it allows the city to respond to requests for endorsement letters or opportunities to advocate when council has already made their position known. The 2017 is a long session, begins next Monday, January 9th. The legislature is expected to focus on education funding this year, but clearly will be taking up any number of other items as well. So direction from the December 5th council meeting. There was a request to add a value statement about how to conduct government business. So I have proposed language for you. I also proposed to attach on the back of the legislative priorities the proclamation that council passed in November. There was also a request to provide more emphasis on key priorities versus having groups of priorities. So I took the feedback and again, I have a proposal from the feedback that I did get for you to respond to. Also, there was a request to list in priority order and to attempt to keep still to one page. So there's a new priority. I realized that I had omitted something pretty major, which was to have as our city's first priority to maintain full access to I-90 R8A lanes, and that is squarely with the state. So I am proposing the addition of this legislative priority. I also have each legislative priority has a more focused heading. After speaking a little bit with Councilmember Sanderson, he gave some feedback along that line, and so they're updated tonight with even more directive language that Councilmember Weicker sent out over the weekend or yesterday. It's like, was it just yesterday? Yes, and that's why I passed out a new priorities page that has that additional language that you all saw in the email.
For the sake of the public, do you want to just give a little bit of clarity and context as to what that language was?
I think that the headings to I think I had something about health and human services, and this one was to enhance health and human services. There were small changes.
I think there were descriptives put in there to make them action-oriented.
Yes, thank you.
Just so that because the public doesn't have the benefit of the email. So.
Okay, so for number 3, instead of recreation transportation funding, having a heading that is just a little bit descriptive, we made it more declarative to allocate recreation transportation funding for Aubrey Davis Park Master Plan. On number 5, instead of health and human services, it's enhance health and human services. And instead of preservation of the environment, a more passive statement, preserve the environment. And for number 7, provide cost recovery instead of just, again, having an explanatory statement. So I think those were all helpful additions. Thank you, Wendy. I also had a request to make property tax reform a standalone item, and so it's included as number 4. Previously, it was included as a part of the Association of Washington Cities and Sound Cities Association priorities that you were considering adopting or supporting their priorities. And then we have tonight a new proposed housing priority proposed by Councilmember Wong, and this is to address the housing and homelessness crisis, support legislation in favor of providing dedicated sources for the construction of affordable housing. So that's another item for you to discuss and decide on tonight.
So just so I understand, that would be a potential number 9?
Yes.
Okay.
And also, if there's, or you could choose to take something else off if you preferred. That's totally.
I suggest the possible deletion of number 7 only because I really didn't understand it. But Kristen did send a follow-up explaining, I guess, the intent of that.
And number 7 is the cost recovery for long-range planning and code enforcement. And as you have learned over the fall with other agenda items, the city is not currently able to collect fees or fees or have fees pay for code enforcement or for long-range planning. And so Development Services Director Scott Greenberg proposed this item and would like to see support for changing the rules at the state level for how those activities are funded. And then our partner agency legislative priorities, instead of having a group of their own as one of our priorities, they are supported by reference as the final legislative priority for, again, Association of Washington Cities and Sound Cities Association. And then if there's any other adjustments that council would like to recommend. So I guess I'd like to go back, and I will just go back to the first one. The new priority, do we have a thumbs up for including the priority of maintaining full access to I-90 R8A lanes as a keeper? All right? Yes.
So I sent email last night or over the weekend, and I suggest we make it a little bit stronger to sort of reinforce what our negotiating points are around I-90. So the language I would recommend and put forward to you guys is request the state legislature honor historic agreements as well as longstanding Sound Transit Project EIS assumptions and require that WashDOT maintain MI traffic mobility in reconfigured R8A lanes of I-90 as light rail construction across Lake Washington commences.
So in my reaction, I like some of that, and I felt like some of it got
muddy.
Well, not muddy exactly, but so prescriptive it started to feel uncomfortable. And so I end up feeling like I want to have a wordsmith, which doesn't seem like the right thing for us to be doing. So maybe, let me suggest this. I'm looking to the rest of the council for whether your reaction was similar to mine or less than mine or more than mine, and would then suggest that Kirsten take that as direction and we finalize it tonight, but she still have the latitude to make tweaks based on what she hears from us. Does that work for you as a...
I can do that if council so desires.
So if we're going there, what we need to do is not wordsmith, but get a tenor or what are we trying to get to? So Debbie.
So Wendy, if I understand, you're looking for more impact, more and power and imperative behind the wording that's in here.
Yes, please.
And I think I have confidence in Kirsten's ability to translate what currently sits here, because to me, I get your point. Request state legislature sounds very polite, and less than I think the urgency and conviction that we would want to communicate. So if that's truly the spirit, then I would certainly agree with it and support doubling down.
Others?
All right.
So just to try and clarify, what I was suggesting is something that's kind of sits in the middle between what Wendy had suggested and what's here now. Maybe tending a bit more towards Wendy's end of it, but not quite going as far as that. Is that direction okay with the rest of you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to soften what you've said, but not a lot. Is where I am landing. Yes.
Because that's what I thought. It was the level.
It's
of
not
detail.
soften. It's the detail.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so thumbs up on that, Council?
I will work with Councilmember Weicker, and we will come up with a mutually agreeable statement.
There you go. Okay. You guys take care of it.
We'll do it.
Yeah, yes. There you go. Okay, so...
All right. And then the revised titles, I'm sure everybody's good with.
Like them.
Property tax reform as a standalone item. Is that, and that is...
It's in the wording that's here now, right? So,
it's number 4.
Yeah, so it's as... Yep.
So it's pulled out from both AWC and
to that?
SCA.
Can I just make an interesting comment? When I read this, it says First, I thought it was arbitrary annual 1%. I didn't really feel it was arbitrary. I thought it was voter imposed. But with a growth limit whose maximum is inflation plus the rate of population growth, which I'm, in principle, I'm okay with that. But I think that certainly doesn't solve Mercer Island's operating cost issue, because if you basically take a rate of inflation that's been, I think, less than 1% in some respects, depending on which formula you use, and our population growth is only measured, I believe, once every 10 years, we're not getting anything out of it. So,
numbers every year.
yeah. So I guess, my point is, I'm fine with it, but if we were looking to actually have substantially more discretion than we have right now, this probably wouldn't get us there. So.
And I would like to say that I pulled that word for word from the Sound Cities legislative agenda, just because it was there to take the language. So
I think it makes sense if there's cities that are growing quite rapidly, but at this point we are not.
Well, at a minimum, I'd pull the word arbitrary out. I agree with Deb that it's kind of needlessly provocative.
Okay.
I would be supportive of that. Others
All right.
okay with that? Okay, so scratch arbitrary, leave the rest is what I think I hear.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Scratch the word arbitrary, leave everything else. Okay?
And then the new proposed housing priority.
And Benson, turning to you, is this reflective of a shared statement by other cities, or is this uniquely our creation?
No, I think it's in the AWC. I guess the reason why I did is because even though it's incorporated in the SCA, I think it is, you highlight the property tax reform, you highlight the some of these other issues, and it sort of gets lost by incorporating by reference. But I think it is. Yeah, I guess if you SCA on page 9 of the exhibit or agenda bill, they actually call out taking some action as far as addressing the homelessness issue, and they actually list some ways of providing dedicated funding.
Thank you.
I recognize we have a space issue, though. So.
Well.
Use the font.
Fonts are a wonderful tool.
Although I would say I'd like it in. I don't want to replace anything. I'd like to keep it to a page. I do think number 6, which I love, has a lot of detail in it. And if we're in priority order, it's down at 6. I think 6 can actually be trimmed a bit to make room for this.
Prudent use of space.
It's very prescriptive.
I'm a master at words, so I'll get it on a page.
Yeah, we can make
do
it
this.
fit.
We can do it.
Is there?
I'd prefer that to getting into debating which of Ross's children to pull here.
I think you can keep them with less words, but Allie can do that.
And is there a suggestion of where you would like this in the order? The housing and homelessness?
What do you like, Benson? You proposed it.
Well, certainly above number the last one. Number 8 is sort of catch-all.
I would argue it goes higher than that, given particularly the statement we just made with regard to funding Arch.
Let me suggest between 6 and 7.
It's mailed out to our state reps. Is that all? Is that what happens? I mean,
I didn't get to the next.
New city
I didn't get to the
leaning in.
next steps.
I'm gonna,
yes.
give her the opportunity here to.
I'm delighted to speak up on this.
Actually, we were just speaking this afternoon about going to Olympia and actually sharing this with one-on-ones with our representatives. So we are planning to do that so we can more formally do that in person. It's very customary, so we'll just start doing that effective this year.
Great.
Out of curiosity, have we done it in the past?
What we've done in the past is we have sent this along with a cover letter.
Well, I like this idea. It's very good. Yeah.
And if you want to come along on that trip, you are welcome to. It's January.
February.
Oh, sorry, February
15th, 14th, 15th, and 16th.
So, yeah.
Well, let us know.
Okay. And it's the official title is
City Action Day, AWC City Action Days.
Yeah, it's a 2-day soiree if you choose to go that long with. I've gone a couple of times, and there are a number of educational sessions put on by AWC, which can be helpful to learn about the issues. There's the opportunity to meet with your legislators, and there is also a dinner that's put together with 41st, 48th, and I don't remember the other districts in our vicinity, but that has the legislators and the local electeds who venture to Olympia all getting together for a chance to chat about issues. And I think that, as much as anything, I've found to be a helpful opportunity to talk about the issues that are of interest to all of us and how to advance those.
Okay. Oh, yes.
I have to say, Tracy Grambaugh's question actually provoked me to read more closely. AWC. I don't want to slow down the adoption of this, but in reading under public records, it says, however, advances in technology and the increased volume and complexity of record requests are undermining the PRA. I understand most of that sentence, except for the part of how advances in technology are undermining the PRA. So I think what I would like is maybe you and me, Kirsten, can understand more specifically what the issues and the intent are here, because again, technology, I'm not quite sure how that's undermining, and it just seems like a very odd statement to me.
Yeah, I want to support Deb on that. I mean, I thought Tracy's point was well taken, and I mean, I would call it. I mean, I'd make your point more general, which is sort of the anti-blank check provision, which is that we do support their goals, but until something is specific legislation, I think we reserve the right to take a look at it and decide whether we actually support it or not. So I think it's nice to say overall we support, the AWC and the SCA. But it's not a blank check for them to write whatever legislation they want if we happen to have a separate opinion.
No change to this language here, but
unless you were to write something at the end to say to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis.
I would suggest we not, but I would also suggest that, given what I hear here, if some organization comes to me and says, "Would you please sign off on this Public Records Act language," I should probably have a conversation with the council before I am responding to that.
Okay.
Kirsten, anything else?
Oh, the next steps, which we've already addressed, what will be happening, and that's it.
Great. Thank you very much.
So if we could, pardon me? Oh, they're all good. They're all good.
Yeah, we do.
Yes, we
need a
do need a motion.
So, on page 2. Pretty simple.
Wing it, baby.
It's.
I'm going.
Page 2.
I'm doing it. Adopt the final City of Mercer Island 2017 state legislative priorities. Boom.
As amended.
As amended.
Discussion?
Hey, in 6, you wrote date certain. This is tiny. Just certain by a certain date. Just, Allie, if you can look at that. Yeah, in number 6.
Point 1.
Yeah, point 1, it says phase it out by a date certain.
Date
which is-
certain has a meaning. I mean,
Does it have a specific meaning? It sounds like
Yes.
something Yoda would say.
It might be.
Right? It's like by a certain date, that's how English speakers might.
Sounds fancier this way.
It sounds firmer. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Kirsten.
You're welcome.
And, yes, and thank you for, definitely for putting in that preamble about aligning with our values.
Mhm.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I think that was a good move. It's nice to have us give that some extra legs.
Yes.
So, thank you. All right, we come to other business. Council member absences. Councilmember Grouse is someplace headed for the South Pacific. Yeah. So, is there a motion to excuse him?
To forgive him for... Or to...
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Planning schedule. Julie, this is the moment where we turn to you and say, what's up with the planning schedule?
Mayor, I think the one thing I'd just like to point out is really for January, we're looking at Tuesday meetings. So want to point out our next time that you'll convene here is on Tuesday, January 17th. Of course, we're off on January 16th in observance of Dr. Martin Luther King Day. And I'll get the hang of this and hopefully do a better job at this. But at the moment, that's all I wanted to point out.
That's just fine.
So it's not very fleshed out, the schedule, but I would like to just request that, again, the residential project, that we, instead of waiting till the very end to get it from the Planning Commission, that we actually get regular updates here as part of our council sessions. I think it's something we discussed. It's a best practice, having learned from the mistakes of the town center thing. I'd like, that to be worked into the schedule if my fellow council people are of the same mind.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Are you looking for a study session or just more of a presentation on this is what we've accomplished to date?
Yeah, I think it's I don't know the difference. I think it's a study session where this is where it's at. These are the decisions. These are the decisions, and we're providing feedback as we go on the decisions that they're making, so it can go back to them, and rather than have a big lump at the end and possible issues.
So I'm sort of two minds on this. I think when we were doing the town center work, I can't remember exactly how we handled it, but I'm sure we had the discussion about that we wanted to give, on the one hand, we wanted to have some visibility into it, and on the other hand, we wanted to make sure the Planning Commission had the autonomy that it needed to do its work and didn't feel that council was pre-directing it. And I'm pretty sure we had that conversation. I can't remember where we landed on it, but I know it was worthy of at least some debate. Jeff, you're
well. If you're of two minds, I'm with the one that agrees with me.
You're reopening it.
No, but again, the way I believe they're doing the process is they're taking it topic by topic. So every month or month and a half, they will have completed, so it's not pre-planning, they will have completed 3 or 4 topics. I think it's a good chunk to come to us, and then hand it back to them if we have suggested changes. So I wouldn't call it pre-planning at all. It's actually review, is what I would say. Not to take topics that they haven't covered yet, but what they've covered in the previous 2 months.
So I guess what I would say is I'd be generally supportive of this with the caveat that I would like Scott's weigh in on and Evan's weigh in on exactly how they see this process working, and that they have the opportunity to express any opinions, positive or negative, about it before we get too far down the path of booking it. Dave?
I'm with Jeff, and I don't see what's controversial about it. I think we're just giving more than anything the public a chance for, here's where we are, here's the portion of the road we've gone down, and whatever they haven't gone down yet is fine. But I think we want to just make sure we have as much visibility into what's taking place and where their thinking is as possible. And we tend to like to ask questions of folks, too. So rather than a kind of a ta-da moment at the end, I think it would be super cool if we could, as much for the public, more for the public than for us, but also for us.
Mayor, if I might, I know that the Planning Commission is on a very tight schedule, and so if they present to council and council would like them to go back and reconsider some things, it will change the schedule. So I think I'd like to recommend that we take this back to DSG, duly noting the council interests and concerns, and come back with a recommendation of how we'll do that presentation. Instead of promising something tonight without DSG in the room, we need to, I think, talk with them.
Kirsten, if I can, clarify again.
Yeah.
So the schedule did not build in report backs to the council at this point.
I do not believe so.
It's not the report back to the council that's the issue. It's the council then revising. The concern that if we revise what they're doing, that there's not the time built in for that, I think.
And I'm not saying that that can't work. It will change the schedule. So I think that it would be in our best interest to talk with DSG staff and be able to come back with better information for council.
To me, the distinction is going to be whether this is an informed session or this is an inform and take feedback session. And
Yes.
that level of specificity
Yes.
in whatever proposal they come back with, which would be appreciated.
Yes, and it would be helpful to know if we have 4 thumbs up for, it sounds like we probably have everybody nodding their head at yes, inform, and then the question is inform and take feedback and, back to perhaps do some additional work. That's what we need to know if we have 4 thumbs up for that part of the process.
If Julie was going to...
Just to share a perspective, it's to try to avoid doing the work that your planning commission is tasked with doing. So, for example, if you are asking typically you would ask the planning commission to hold the public hearings and get the feedback and to prepare an ordinance for you, code language and that sort of thing. They've done that. They've created that record for you. However, if the public can just go sideways and go directly to the council and do that, I mean, that could happen. And I think it's just something for you to consider. But on the one hand, if you're providing that feedback in advance of all the ordinance and code being written, that could be helpful too. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'm arguing on both sides, but I think this is something, if you wouldn't mind, I'll talk with Scott about this, get a better understanding of what the schedule is, since I'm really new to that. I do have the meeting on my calendar, but certainly want to get a better sense of the schedule. And I see you're really expressing a desire to play a role in this early, and you're not wanting to really probably micromanage and do all these changes at the end. You want to provide feedback early so that what comes to you in a final code is something that really the community has expressed they want. You've bought into it, and really at the end of the day, when it comes to adopting it, it's well done. It's well thought out. And I think that is probably, my guess, an interest the Planning Commission would have, DSG would have. Yeah. So if you're comfortable with that, we'll look at that and provide you with an update. I don't know, email, probably through email, just because it'll be more expeditious. Okay?
Okay. I'll just register that I'm concerned about creating a situation where council's sort of overriding work along the way that the Planning Commission's doing.
You mean unlike we did in the town center where we just overrode it at the very end? let's just, I mean, that, you know that, I mean, we can discuss this at our retreat or wherever you'd like to. But again, my learning from the town center process is that if we are the final judges, and not only the final judges are saying yay or nay to what they hand us, but we have the right, as a number of people here did, to completely gut what they recommended, then we better be doing it along the way and giving them a chance to refine and take the feedback. That's all.
Okay. Wendy?
Speaking of our retreat, do we have a list of items to talk about? It seems to me it's like 5 days worth of stuff, not a day and a half. And if there's an opportunity to provide recommendations for other topics or take some off?
You're asking an excellent question, and this is a topic that we need to sit down and talk about soon, I think, is trying to put together that agenda.
Yes, and thank you for asking that. I know I've started meeting with council members one-on-one. That is my number one question. What do you want to accomplish at the planning session? What do you believe are the main topics? I am hearing some themes around that, but I haven't talked with every single person. So I'd like to do that and then really work with the mayor to draft an agenda for you to look at. I think we do need to be realistic. We can't cover it all. And I would love to, for myself, really understand what are your primary goals. Obviously, you're going to hold me accountable to those goals, so I really want to have a clear understanding of that. So I'm very interested in really focusing ourselves high level on what you want to accomplish, why you want to accomplish it, and really what, you have a day and a half dedicated to this? It's just not a lot of time. So I think we want to be really thoughtful about what's on your agenda. So I have an interest in limiting how many items are on there.
Historically, we've had Friday evening, Saturday, and half of Sunday. And the last couple of years, we did away with Sunday.
And I'd like to remind you that that Sunday is Super Bowl Sunday.
But the Broncos aren't
playing.
Not that it matters to some people, but it does matter to other people.
Yeah. So sounds like we're trying really hard to use Friday evening, Saturday.
No, I'm open to. I mean, I don't know when the Super Bowl starts. I'm sensitive to that, but a half a day on Sunday. This is a real. We've got so many critical issues that if half a day Sunday that terminate. I mean, the Super Bowl's in the afternoon, I think. I'm down with it, and we'll provide the bagels.
And last year we did start earlier. We started at about 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon. And so that's also an option to continue this year.
I think I would just encourage the city manager, to determine what those priorities are. And if it needs a couple hours on Sunday, I'm certainly going to be there. If it doesn't, let's go forth. But I have confidence that she's going to be able to come up with a strong recommendation, which is really what's going to guide my preference.
Dave?
Don't we have a running list going, though? I mean,
we do.
Where is that located?
Probably not with Julie, who just...
Because every time I come up with an idea you guys don't like, you say, oh, that's a planning session topic.
Yeah.
We have a list.
And there's no list of those.
We've been keeping a list, and we have it. We're not going to show you. I'm just kidding. No, the leadership team has done some work with the list, and we'll be meeting with Julie later this week to talk with her, and then she can see what we've collected over the year.
If we could, just quickly, the question has been raised, and I think some of you have weighed in. I know I have at least a little bit on whether we have a, what do they call it? Facilitator or not. Yeah, thank you for that. Happy to have any group thoughts on that. Maybe you feel like you already know exactly where everybody's mind is on it, but I'd sort of lean no. I'm open, but I'd lean no because we've had facilitators who've done not the greatest work for us in the past or have sat a little bit idly by. Some contentious issues this time around, and your recommendation is yes, I think. And so I just was curious if there others had thoughts you wanted to share now. Don't have to. Vincent?
Initially, I spoke with Julie before Christmas, and I My initial reaction was no, but she convinced me. I'm now with a yes, because not only does it allow, I thought that perhaps she would be the facilitator, but that's not fair to her, fair to her, because she needs to be able to participate. And she actually said something that made a lot of sense, that using a facilitator will allow you, Mayor, to participate with everybody else. And so I'm in favor of it. I know, frankly, we have had some bad facilitators, but that person will not be retained to do this one. And so as long as we get a good facilitator, it makes a lot of sense to me.
You support it?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Debbie?
What Benson said, if we have a good facilitator, I'm 100% behind it. I think it does. It provides both you and Julie the opportunity to participate rather than have to equally manage the meeting, and then we get more benefit from your participation. So I'm all in.
Okay. Okay. Let's assume we're going forth. Better go find somebody.
And they better be good.
Yeah, they better be good, yeah, because we've had a dud or two. Okay, thank you for that. We're moving to council member reports. Dave, you want to start? Okay, that was easy. Debbie?
I don't think so.
Jeff? Wendy? Benson?
Really nothing except to remind people February 8 is the Mercer Island YFS breakfast. Yeah. So anyway.
Okay, and I have nothing at this point either. We're all coming off holidays and trying to now get our feet back on the ground. Thank you all, and thank you, and welcome again. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.